Finally! Finally! Hello, everyone! Welcome to the Forest of Memories. I'm Zaruk Windcaller, the Guardian, High Remembrancer, and Arbiter of the Forest of Memories. I hope you didn't get lost on your way here. Well, that took a lot longer than I wanted it to, and it's still giving me crap because, well, iTunes insists on doing a bunch of bullshit every time you hook up your phone. How did I get here? Good question. How did you? Again, the forest attracts people in a variety of ways. Perhaps there was some memory you needed unloaded. Perhaps there was something you were trying to remember. Or perhaps you just felt like you needed answers to questions you could not find yourself. And yet you find yourself here. That's about all I can give you, I'm afraid. I was just trying to get to the You found your way to the Forest of Memories while just trying to get to the kitchen? You don't have to say it. I know you're not a clever man. But regardless, today we're going to be doing the Meme Tank Monday. I'm going to be real with you guys. I was sick all weekend. I had an upper respiratory infection, so I couldn't do anything. And I was just laid up and couldn't get my mind working. Hello, Raleigh. How you doing? And sure thing, Lich King. Go ahead, relax and lurk. Play some Battle Network. But yeah, so today was kind of an up-in-the-air thing, but while I was at work, I decided that, you know what? Let's fuck around and have some fun. A lot of people like the React streams, and I kind of want to do them again. And we'll do them again more often with Badger stuff when it comes out, or like Thero stuff, if that's good. Thank you. Yeah, I had to go to the doctor, and I'm feeling a lot better. But with that in mind, one thing I do want to do is continue doing the streams where I kind of like react and talk about things. And I felt like this would be kind of funny. So, sit back, relax, and let's do this. Alright, so we are going to be doing meme tanks today. Now, if you guys don't know who Potential History is, you're missing out. Potential History is a great channel. He's kind of died off recently, which is kind of sad, but a lot of his videos are great. So, without further ado,
when sense is prevailing
and logic is on the rise, our nonsensical heroes roll into action,
donning their disguises and moving at a snail's pace. They flail into action. They are the Meme Tanks.
Meme Tanks. Meme Tanks.
Alright, getting back to my roots. I've had multiple requests to look at multiple different tanks, but most of them don't have enough information for a whole video. So I'm gonna do a couple of what I think are the most meme-worthy tanks. And I'm not going by any particular standard, I've just picked 3 that make me laugh.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
This first one isn't technically a separate tank. It's actually just a panther in a costume, but the story behind it is pretty funny. In 1944, in the lead-up to Operation Watch on the Rhine, that would come to be known as the Battle of the Bulge, Adolf Hitler ordered the creation of a special German commando unit that was to use Allied uniforms and equipment to impersonate American soldiers and cause confusion behind the lines via switching around road signs and other various forms of sabotage. The specifics of this operation, known as Operation Grief, or Griffin in German, were the brainchild of SS Commando Otto Skirtzny.
Okay, real quick, let's talk about this man. This is Otto Skirtzny. Now, Otto Skirtzny is perhaps one of the most famous commandos in history because of the shit he pulled off. Not only was he responsible for a lot of planning and a lot of commando operations, and yes, I know he looks like a Bond villain. He looks like a James Bond villain, but I assure you, well, I mean, he kind of is with all this crazy stuff he did. He's an asshole. Actually, no. Skirtzny, we don't know a lot about Otto Skirtzny. That's the thing. Otto Skirtzny was, much like his career choice, was a very quiet man and didn't talk much. But some of the stuff he has done that he did do is, he's the guy that broke Mussolini out of prison. When the Italian government overthrew Mussolini and put him in prison, Otto Skirtzny was the guy who led the commandos to get El Duce out of prison. That's Skirtzny's man. And Skorzny was again picked to lead this Operation Grief. Now, we'll talk more about Operation Grief a little bit later and what it did, but you'll see that well, even this man can't do miracles.
For this, he requested thousands of English-speaking German soldiers, along with uniforms and hundreds of captured Allied vehicles. However, he only received a fraction of the English-speaking soldiers he requested, and only a fraction of those could put on a convincing American accent.
This, fun fact, that actually was a bit of an issue, because a good number of those German soldiers could speak English. There was just one problem. The type of phrases and the words they used, they picked up in England, not the United States. There's a documented case where some of these German commandos stopped an American supply unit because they were in need of fuel for their vehicles. And the one in the unit who could speak English told them, said, "Hey, can we get some petrol from y'all?" Now, I don't know about y'all, but you don't call it petrol in the United States. You call it gas or fuel. And this was very odd to the American soldiers, who quickly who quickly began to ask questions and quickly took the men under arrest. So, yeah. Funny how that works out, huh?
He also only got a handful of vehicles out of the numbers he requested, including only 2 M4 Shermans that were in a state of disrepair. To remedy this problem, Skorzenny opted to disguise around 10 Panther Gs as American M10 tank destroyers called the Ersatz, or False Panther. At least I think that's what that means. From what I can tell, it doesn't translate well. If anybody speaks German and knows a better translation, let me know. This was achieved by welding metal sheeting onto the Panther and removing its commander's cupola, essentially blinding the commander, to mimic the body of an M10 tank destroyer. And it does look sort of convincing. The problem is that there is no way to cover up or alter the suspension, which looks nothing like the M10's horizontal bogie suspension, or to cover up the width of the tracks, which are much greater than that on an M10. Also, the M10 did not have a muzzle brake, and the Panther had to retain its obviously German muzzle brake to have the gun still safely recoil. So if this tank is approaching an Allied tank, the first thing the American tankers are going to see is the obvious German muzzle brake before they even see the disguise, which in and of itself, with all those things stated, is not too terribly convincing. I mean, look at it. An American tanker's gonna know that that is not on their side. The Germans also had to put markings on the tanks to signal to other German vehicles that they were friendly, most notably a yellow triangle on the rear of the tank, and the American tankers, upon not recognizing this symbol, would probably become suspicious. In action, the Ersatz Panther did not perform very well. In less than 2 days, the attack bogged down before they could capture any of their objectives, due to the 1st SS not linking up with them at their starting point. After this, Skorzenny made a request that the unit operate as a normal panzer brigade, essentially abandoning the mission, and 5 of the Panther M10s were destroyed before the operation concluded. Skorzenny's deception unit, though, was able to cause some confusion behind the enemy lines, and a few friendly fire incidents between American soldiers.
And more than that, actually. So, it cannot be understated how much, it wasn't severe damage, but it was pretty bad. Skorzenny's men did a good amount of, they knocked down road signs, they misled, they gave false information. They did a lot of stuff and prompted a lot of confusion behind Allied lines, and American troops became extremely paranoid about anyone or everyone that was coming through their lines. One captured commando even said that they were planning on making their way into Allied command, into deep behind Allied lines, and killing generals like Bradley and all that kind of stuff. Hello, Dirt Fridge. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Forest of Memories. Please make yourself at home. But the thing... Now, of course, that wasn't their plan. That was just to sow even more confusion among the Allied ranks. But I have to point out that there was one hilarious example where General Bernard Montgomery got stopped by an American roadblock, and because he didn't know anything about American baseball or American cartoons or American music, they fucking arrested him. They literally took him under guard and arrested him for being a spy, and held him in an American prison thing for I think a few hours until British forces were like, "Hey, no, that's our general." Yeah. What? Yeah, no, they did. They held him prisoner because they thought they were like, "Yeah, no, Hey, yeah, it's honestly pretty funny to think about. Yeah. They were that paranoid. And, I mean, and remember, and for those who don't know, I'm sure Dirt Fridge probably knows this. Also, Dirt Fridge, I just noticed your icon is the Russian Death Fridge, and I approve. But the thing is, the questions that American soldiers were asking one another were things like baseball questions, cartoon questions, comic book questions, music, that kind of stuff. And if you didn't know those things, they'd either arrest you or shoot you. And how was General Montgomery supposed to know anything about that? I just find it hilarious.
So his deceptive operations were not a complete failure, but this Panther nonsense definitely was.
Oh, there's another reason why the American forces took it so seriously. Earlier in the war, there had been a suggested, not even suggested, it actually was going to happen. It actually happened. It just didn't get very far. There was a German plan to sneak elite German commando units into the back lines and earlier in the war and kill high-ranking Allied leaders like General Eisenhower, General Bradley, General Montgomery, General Patton. Eisenhower was actually was priority one. The plan was I think it was when he was in Holland, or Belgium, I don't know. But the plan was these commandos were going to sneak their way into Belgium and kill General Eisenhower. Didn't work because the plan didn't even get through part one of its it didn't even get through part one.
Bigger.
But yeah, that was the whole idea. German commandos tried these assassination attempts multiple times, so that's why the American troopers were so jumpy about it. Didn't he become president? Yes, Eisenhower became president after Harry Truman. As the Animaniacs said in the Real President song, Harry Truman, weird little human, serves 2 terms, and when he's done, it's Eisenhower who's got the power from 53 to 61. Yeah, he was president for 8 years. Unfortunately, the Germans' Foxhound program was years behind. Yeah.
Now it only really lives on as one of those stupid premium tanks in World of Tanks.
Doesn't even do anything, it's just a Panther reskin.
And in the real world, no M10 Panthers survived to this.
How do you remember that song from years ago? Because it helped me and my little brother remember the presidents when we were in school. I never remember the geography one or the states one, but I can remember my presidents.
Day. Next are the mine flail tanks employed by the British.
Wow! How original!
This design was actually an idea of a British South African soldier named Abraham de Troyes in 1941, and they eventually become one of the more popular variants in Hobart's Funnies. The flails were initially put onto Matilda II tanks and used in North Africa to some success. On the Matilda, the flail was powered by a separate engine housed in a box on the side of the hull that was operated by an additional crew member from within the box. And to the guys who had to crew that position sitting next to a hot-running engine inside a metal box in the deserts of Africa, hats off to you, because that sounds like arguably the worst job of the war.
I don't even want to think about that for a second. Sitting in a cramped metal box next to a heated up engine in the fucking deserts of Africa? No thanks. No thanks. I'd rather die.
This concept did have a few flaws though. When running, the flail would kick up huge amounts of dust that would blind the crews to where they didn't know where they were going. But it also blinded German guns in the form of a kind of smoke screen, so that wasn't all bad. But the dust would also be sucked into the engines and cause frequent breakdowns. Also, the flail chains would sometimes be blown off the rotor and fly in any direction, possibly injuring friend and foe alike. Later, in Western Europe, the flails were put on Sherman tanks and wire cutters were added to the flail to help the tank clear barbed wire, and were used most famously by the 79th Armored Brigade, with various detachments being lent out to other Allied units. The flails saw use mostly with the British Army, but had some limited use by the Americans. But now I'm sure you're wondering why I would call this a meme tank, because it was objectively fairly successful, and it's honestly because I can't look at this thing in action without laughing. I mean, this is the definition of, hey, if it works, it works, just because of how stupid it looks, and every time I see it, I always picture this. but it is still less retarded than this roly boy.
Ah, the roly boy. So, yeah, hold on.
But it is still less retarded than this roly boy.
So, yeah, this thing existed. We'll get to this. Don't worry. Oh, Nick, the showdown guitars, that showdown guitar bit's from Ace Combat.
There's a handful of these surviving, most notably a Sherman variant in the Bovington Tank Museum.
Meme machine, meme machine. I'm a motherfucker.
Yeah, this is what you came for. The be-all, end-all meme machine.
Now, we've talked about the mouse before. If you were here some time ago when I was reading from the book My Tank is Fight, we talked about the mouse tank. For lack of a better word, fucking thing sucks! It was, again, he'll go into more detail here, but there's such a thing as too much Wunderwaffen. You'll see, Mega Zero.
The mouse is what you get when you follow the German-Soviet heavy tank dick measuring contest to Hitler's overcompensating conclusion.
That's it. The mouse is what you get when you basically see the German and Soviet tank dick measuring contest to its extremes. It looks like a doorstop with treads. I mean, it kind of is.
This massive, nearly 200-ton vehicle was what...
Yeah, 200 tons. I'll let that sink in.
Was supposed to come after the Tiger II before super heavy tank production was halted by Speer. The prototypes that were created are a testament to Hitler's mentality that large mobile steel bunkers would change Germany's fortunes in the war. His opinions were most likely colored by his experiences of the first implementation of tanks by the British in World War I that he came into contact with firsthand. So put into the context of Hitler's experience, this tank makes a lot of sense. But in the context of the reality of World War II, which was a very mobile combined arms war, where Germany no longer had air superiority, it makes absolutely no sense. In reality, if deployed, this thing would be a large, slow-moving target and easy pickings for Allied fighter bombers, or something that ground troops could just maneuver around. I think an apt metaphor would be the fat kid on the playground getting into a fight. Sure, he can take a lot of punches, and he can throw a punch pretty hard, but all the other kids could just run away from him or throw rocks at him from the top of the jungle gym. And what's he gonna do then, if he can neither run nor climb? There is one mouse prototype that survived the war. It's actually the turret of one prototype in the hull of another that was captured by the Russians and resides near Moscow. These are just 3 of my favorite meme tanks, among others that I've covered in the past, but let me know if there are any others that I should cover in the future in the comments. But I'm looking for real creativity here. The Bob Simple tank is just way too easy. Low-hanging fruit.
We'll get to the Bob Simple tank. We'll get to the Bob Simple tank. I promise. Next.
Mini-tanks are studied for their amazing combat performances, innovative designs, and impressive statistics. These tanks become legends, and have many things written about them.
Sometimes way too much.
So, confession time from Zaruk Windcaller. I don't like the Tiger tank. The Tiger tank is cool. It is. But dear God, I wish people would shut up about it. Please, shut up. It's like, this is not the big bad wonder weapon you think it is. It's a joke. Like, for the time when it did stuff, yeah, it was great. But the problem is that there were never enough of them. Like, at all. You guys want to know something funny? Sorry, I had to get a drink right there. Let me tell you guys a little funny fact. By the time the Allies landed in Normandy, about a week after the Normandy landings, do you know how many Tiger tanks were in Western Europe capable of fighting the Allies? You know, fighting off the Allied invasion? 35. Yeah. 35. And that's your big wonder weapon. Uh-huh. This is the tank that Verabus and German supremacists jerk themselves off to and fall asleep dreaming of at night. No. Because you want to know something else about it? Yeah. If but they're over a whole continent. That's sad. Yeah, it is. It's very sad. And it didn't take long for for a lot of other tank drivers to realize, oh wait, if we actually close the distance with this thing, the 76 millimeter gun on a lot of the upgun Shermans will punch right through the front armor of that thing, and God forbid if it's a Sherman Firefly, which is the British version with the 17-pounder anti-tank gun, which will cut this thing in half like a hot knife through butter. Look, I'm not saying it didn't do a good job. It did. When it was used properly, it was terrifying. But the thing is, there were never enough of them. They were easily exploited. And most importantly, the early model Tigers were very unreliable. Like, the late war Tigers were pretty good. They didn't have a lot of... Well, okay. Let me put it that way. They still had their issues, but let me put it this way. Early war Tiger tanks were basically breaking down every day in some form or fashion. The late war Tigers were breaking down every 3 or 4 days. And I'm talking things from like clogged fuel filters, clogged oil filters, engine trouble, engine strain, everything. Oh, and one more thing that's really funny. This thing didn't have a powered turret. You had to manually rotate this thing. So if you needed to rotate the turret on a Tiger tank, some dude had to rotate a wheel, like pull this crankshaft to rotate the turret. So, which is why, if you ever watch any like historical footage, it's why the Tiger tank usually just pivots in place, like left and right, like it rotates, rather than turning the turret, because that's faster. Manually rotating a tank turret sounds very disappointing. Yeah, especially for this period. Which is why the Sherman is so cool, because the Sherman had a hydraulic powered rotating turret, and something the Shermans had that the Tigers couldn't even dream of, gyro stabilizers. So a Sherman could fire accurately on the move. Something a German tank couldn't even dream of. German tanks had to stop, aim, and shoot. Whereas a Sherman could keep driving, look at a target and be like, all right, that's the target. Drive fast, shoot faster. Yeah. Amazing how that works, huh? And yet so many people write about this.
But some tanks are memes, and due to bad design or just weird design, suffer in combat or are just funny all around. And this video is about some of the memes, a few of which you can take command of in the World War II tank and plane simulator, War Thunder, who is the sponsor for this episode. Click the link in the description to sign up and play for free, and as a bonus for signing up through me, you'll get a premium tanker aircraft and 3 days of premium, but more in the game later. The story of the BT tanks is almost less about them than their creator, J. Walter Christie. Christie had made his name building race cars after the turn of the century, and as World War I began, he shifted his creative vision from civilian vehicles to military vehicles. His crowning achievement first became known as the M1928, an extremely fast tank with thin sloping armor that he planned to be used by the US Army for exploitation attacks through enemy lines to attack their rear and logistics. Due to a combination though of different army doctrine and lack of funds, the Christie design was rejected by the United States, and a few years later he began selling them to the Soviet Union, which was rapidly expanding its military in the 30s. Christie had to sell the hulls under the guise of being agricultural tractors, as trade between the US and Soviet Union was very limited at the time, and he never sought approval from the US government to undertake this deal. Christie's 1928 then became the Soviet BT, or Fast Tank series, and had quite a few innovations for the time. They used the Christie suspension, consisting of large coil springs that were extremely fast and lightweight, to where they could pull off ridiculous stunts like these, that no other tank from the time could. They also had a very strange feature that was the ability to remove the tracks of the vehicle and have it run on its road wheels using a steering wheel to drive. All of which seem like weird choices, but knowing that Christie was a previous sports car designer, it all makes more sense. The Russians then went on to build these things in the thousands, including the BT-2, BT-5, and BT-7, all with various upgrades. In practice though, the BT tanks did not perform as well as hoped due to the scenarios they found themselves in. The highlight of their combat career, at least as far as numbers go, took place in Finland in 1940 and during Operation Barbarossa in 1941, where they were either not able to move very well and got bogged down in the case of Finland, or had to be used as defensive weapons, which they were not meant for in the Soviet Union, making the BTs the right tank for the wrong war. Highlighted by the fact that even though, as I mentioned before, the Soviets built thousands, it's fairly difficult to find one nowadays, especially in good condition, as so many were lost to the Germans in 1941. Although they did see more success in the East against the Japanese, and in Poland and in the Spanish Civil War, where they were able to be used more in their designed role. The BTs did have a few variants made, most notably the Finnish BT-42 conversion, and they heavily influenced the design of the T-34. The incredible stunts it pulled off, though, including the longest jump ever performed by a tank, solidify, at least in my opinion, its meme status.
Okay. He's not joking about how fast these things were. Let me remember, hold on. I need to look up how fast these things were, because they were fast. Let's see. BT-7. So, top speed for the BT-7 on road, 45 to 53 miles per hour. And off-road, 31 miles per hour. That is so bleeding fast for a tank. Well, at least a World War II tank. But still, that is fast. But is jumping a tank really the most useful? Well, yeah. Is jumping a tank really really useful? I mean, have you played War Tank? World of Tanks or War Thunder? Death from Above. Yeah, DFA, Death from Above.
All combatants in World War II had some form of mobile anti-aircraft gun, such as this one for the Germans and this one for the Soviets. In 1943, the Canadians wanted in on some of that hot anti-aircraft tank action, and in the same year proposed and built one based on the Sherman tank. Well, actually the Grizzly, but that's a whole nother story. Replacing the main tank gun with 4 20mm anti-aircraft guns and adding a host of hydraulic systems to the turret to make it turn faster to engage enemy aircraft.
I will let that sink in. Replacing the main gun of a Sherman tank with 4 20mm anti-aircraft guns and a shitload of hydraulics so that thing could spin rapidly and engage aircraft.
Of the 3 built, one was sent to Europe with the 22nd Canadian Armored Regiment and saw heavy fighting and was seen as a big asset by fellow tank crews to flesh out small pockets of resistance. And I know at this point, this thing sounds completely awesome and in no way a meme. And it really was pretty awesome. Also, you know what would be awesome? If it was put into War Thunder. I'm just saying, there's already all kinds of vehicles like this. Just War Thunder, you should put it in the game. Just put it in the game. The reason for its meme status...
It is now in the game. This video is pretty old, but as of now, the skink is now in War Thunder.
Is that by 1944, the Luftwaffe basically no longer existed, and the field reports say that although the skink performed well in the combat it was involved in, it never found any planes to shoot at, and therefore could never be combat-proven in its designated role, and the project was cancelled because the Allies already had plenty of vehicles to fight ground troops with and didn't need another one. To my knowledge, there are no skinks left. One was converted into a Kangaroo armored personnel carrier, and the other was used as a hard target on a firing range.
Peinado porque no me dio tiempo nada ponerme la chancla y el bañador. Voy a la playa, había subido la marea. Había subido la marea y encontré una paella.
Whoa, that tall
Tank.
looks terrible.
Whoa, that tall tank looks terrible. Get some rest, tall tank. You can't be burning the candle at both ends.
This one's one of my favorites. The M3 Lee looks like its designer had read a lot about tanks, studied the features of previous ones in immense detail, and had talked to other tank designers in depth about what all should be involved, but had never actually seen or been in one before. Developed very quickly as a stopgap tank in 1940 for British Lend-Lease as the Sherman was still in development and US production capabilities had not been set up yet, the Lee borrowed from previous American designs, some successful and some not, and a few features from the Sherman, which had gone through some of its trials already. It sported a 7-man crew, which was cut down to 6 in the British Grant variant, when the radio operator was eliminated when the radio was put in a bustle in the turret to be used by the commander, and 2 guns, one 37mm anti-tank gun in the turret, and a 75mm in the hull. The 2 guns, although providing a lot of firepower, which is what American tanks were known for, gave the tank a very tall silhouette, which...
Okay, first of all, that's not fair. Leave the M3 Lee alone. Again, stopgap vehicle. And here's the thing, by 1941... when this thing was being handed out via Lend-Lease, and then into 1942 where it actually started seeing combat, it was kind of a big deal to have a vehicle with a 75mm gun. The Lee in North Africa, the M3 Lees and their 75mm guns would tear a German tank in half. I mean, so give them some, be nice to them. Again, stopgap. Not to mention, this was, it's not like everyone was aware of how bad it was. The British and the Soviets would not shut up about how bad it was, but all the Americans could say was, this is all we've got. The Sherman is not ready yet. You're going to have to deal with this. What is a stopgap vehicle? A stopgap vehicle basically means that, a stopgap means that it is something that, was created, something that is created to fill a gap of time while something else is being made. So the Sherman is coming down the production line, but it's not ready yet. So this was created to basically fill that gap of time where nothing was being made. This was made just so there was always something coming off the production line. Because again, World War II was a war of numbers. Things had to be constantly produced and made. And if you're not making something, you're wasting time. And wasting equipment. So this came out. How do tanks turn? Well, depends on the tank, but primarily what you want to do if you want to turn the tank is you literally have to think of it like old video game tank controls. What would happen is if you let's say you want to turn your tank to the right. If you're in an American tank, you've got steering sticks, which are like these two big joysticks, these two big sticks that you grab onto, and if you want to turn the tank to the right, you simply grab the right stick and pull back on it with both hands, and this will cause the tread, the right side of the right treads to rotate back, to move backwards, which will rotate the tank to the right. You can turn on the move, of course, but it was sometimes a lot easier just to rotate in place. So again, just think old game tank controls, where you had to, stop, rotate, and then move. Hi, Fountain.
Show love 100. Hello, my love. Tilde. Hi, everyone. Hype love 1. Zaruk W. Smile. Zaruk Wisp. Zaruk George.
That must suck. Yes. Early tank, American tanks were really bad at that. The Germans had it figured out. The Germans didn't have steering sticks. They basically used a steering wheel, which was really useful.
Something the British and Soviets who used them later complain about. The Soviets really didn't like this vehicle. I've seen claims before of them calling it a coffin for 7 brothers, although I've never seen that from an actual source. I have, though, heard a lot of quotes of them just talking badly about the tank, and with its high silhouette in Russia, they weren't really wrong. In fact, upon review to the British, before the tanks were sent to them, they rejected the vehicle and only accepted it once the United States told them it was literally the only tank they could produce en masse at the time. The tank featured a weird combination of old and new technology, having antiquated riveted armor in its first runs, guns, and side escape doors throughout its entire service life. But it also used the same suspension among other features that were used to great success on the M4. The Lee saw service in North Africa, Russia, and Southeast Asia, but was replaced with better tanks, namely the Sherman, once they were available. Although they did stay in service in Southeast Asia for the duration of the war, as their shortcomings were not as obvious there. I personally love this tank because it perfectly sums up the stereotype of the United States right before World War II of being unprepared to go into conflict. And although this sentiment has various layers of truth to it, it's funny to me how with this interim tank, the US is in such a hurry to provide something that instead of focusing on core features for a designed role, they go ahead and just put everything on it, just in case. It's got the speed of a medium tank, the armament layout of an infantry support vehicle like the Char B, and at least in the initial runs, a shit ton of machine guns like an armored personnel carrier. Although that actually isn't very strange as far as American interwar tanks go, the Americans put machine guns anywhere they could stash them. But the combination...
Okay, first of all, and hey, Rejo, yeah, it's Meme Tank Monday. Thought I would watch these Meme Tank videos and give like a few details here and there, and that's not a stereotype because, yes, American vehicles back then would just strap, if there's a place for a machine gun, strap a machine gun on it because there's no such thing. Well, I think the orcs say it best. There's no such thing as too much DACA. And the Americans embody that.
Blood for the blood god. Skulls for the skull throne.
Hey, more machine guns means more blood for the blood god. That too.
Created this glorious mistake that was there in a time of need that I am so happy exists.
Don't open the door. See? Everything's okay.
Do we have time for bonus
Tank.
Yes, we do. Fantastic.
After the last episode, I was asked a lot to talk about this thing, the VSKFZ 617 Minenraumer. And there's not much information on it, so prepare to be disappointed. This is the Germans' attempt at a large mine-clearing vehicle, and it worked pretty much exactly how you think it would. The large pads on the wheels were meant to run over and detonate mines, clearing a path for other vehicles. The problem was that to withstand the mine blast going on directly under the vehicle, it had to be very heavily armored, and therefore was extremely slow in a large target. Because of this, the
Plus, why clear mines with the vehicle when you have a Straf battalion for that? Straf battalion. That's a joke. That is a joke. Whoops, hold on. That's a, boy. So, Strafbataillon.
Fully armored, and therefore was extremely...
So, before someone asks, because I know you're going to...
fully armored, and therefore was...
What is a Strafbataillon? Yeah, there, Nick asks. Strafbataillon are, Strafbataillons are basically, if my memory serves me correctly, Strafbataillons are basically, German battalions or German units who've been put together from captured enemy soldiers, and they're basically used to clear minefields. Usually by walking through them. Or they're used as target, or they're used as chaff and thrown against enemy defenses. Yeah. Yeah, Strafbataillon. In English, it means penal battalion. Yeah, these are a Strafbataillon is a penal battalion. Yeah. What the fuck? What? Both the Germans and the Soviets use penal battalions. Again, a penal battalion is, like I said, it's basically anything. Anything. Traitors, cowards, prisoners, anything. You basically group them into a unit, and you have them do all the really suicidal, dangerous stuff. Clear a minefield with your bare hands. Walk across a minefield and clear it. Run at the enemy defenses to find out, where the defenses are weakest. Die, basically. Die. Like, that's the whole thing about being a penal battalion unit. You will die. That is guaranteed. You are not meant to survive. You are going to die. Yeah, cannon fodder made from war prisoners. Exactly. Well, the thing about the Suicide Squad is that if they come, like, again, the Suicide Squad are expected to die, but if they come back, they get their sentence shortened. Strop Battalions, you were going to die. That was the end goal. They don't want you. They don't need you. You are expendable. So, yeah, they don't care.
It's extremely slow and a large target. Because of this, the project was canceled with just one
I know they're setting mines here, but this is the best clip I could find.
prototype made that never saw service, and it was captured at the end of the war at Kumelsdorf by the Soviets and now resides in Russia. German engineering at its finest, everybody. Now, if you would like to get a taste of what it was like to crew 2 of the 3 main vehicles mentioned, check out the free-to-play realistic online game War Thunder, where you can zip about the battlefield and drift around your enemies in a BT-7, or just be way too tall in an M3 Lee. Or find your own meme vehicle somewhere in the air of the sea, as there are thousands of historically accurate vehicles ranging from the 1930s to the 1990s. When you sign up, be sure to use the link below to get 3 days of premium and a free tanker air.
Next up, number 3. Speaking of War Thunder, yeah, sorry.
Oh, man. There are some baddies out today.
You are not lying, son.
But look at her booty.
Ooh, okay. Oh my God.
Stop right there, criminal scum! Nobody breaks the law on my watch. I'm confiscating your stolen goods. Now pay your fine. Then pay with your blood. Or it's off to jail.
Yo, they look natural too. Look at them bounce.
Yo, look at that one right there going on spring break.
Oh, okay.
Man, I would tear that shit up.
Ooh, there's a pretty lady behind it too.
Oh, she's super pretty.
Yeah, it's cute.
Meme tanks. Cancer.
This video is sponsored by...
Wait, I'm going to read that. I'm going to let y'all see that.
Meme tanks. Cancer.
That graphic setting gave me cancer. So, if y'all didn't catch it, in the last video, he had his graphics set to the lowest setting in War Thunder. So it's like that graphic setting gave me cancer.
This video is sponsored by the free-to-play online game War Thunder. Use the link in the description below to sign up for free and to get a free premium tanker aircraft in 3 days of premium time. But more on that in a second. When designing a tank, there are 3 factors to keep in mind: maneuverability/speed, armor protection, and firepower. In an ideal world, you'll have an equal balance of all 3, and you can see this reflected with tanks today. Although there are some variations, some being heavier and some being lighter, the idea is to have something that won't be a pushover, can get around pretty well, and can kill almost anything it runs into. This video is not about that though. This is about 3 tanks that said fuck it to the mobility part in a very strange period of tank design that resulted in super heavy vehicles that almost exclusively didn't see combat. So just as a heads up, all these vehicles are pretty rare and there's not a lot of footage of them, so be prepared to see some clips multiple times or other stuff as filler. Also be prepared for the cursed watermark. Because Critical Past is the worst and I am not paying them for something that is in public domain. Okay, let's do this.
Alright, next up at the stage, hide your countries, hide your resources, and hide your spices, because she's colonizing everybody out here. Welcome to the stage, the Tog 2! Talk to him, Tog.
The TOG-2 was the second design developed by the Special Vehicle Development Committee, made up of people that had worked on the original British tanks of the First World War that became nicknamed the Old Gang. This group had a very bad case of do the same thing as last time syndrome with the designs they came up with. It was even worse with the TOG-1, but TOG-2 was created with the idea in mind that World War II may devolve into the same trench warfare scenario as World War I, and because of that, they created this 80-ton behemoth to break through enemy emplacements in World War I style assault. This, however, had no basis in reality for what World War II was, and by the time it got to testing, the vehicle was outdated and the project was cancelled. All that being said, though, it did have some good innovations for the outdated design logic that drove its creation, including torsion bar suspension, a 12-cylinder diesel-electric engine powering 2 electric motors to drive the sprockets, and a 17-pounder for the main gun, which is much better than the very underpowered guns proposed to be put into the TOG-1. But with 8.5 miles an hour for a top speed, this thing would have just gotten eaten up on the battlefield, and it's very understandable why it was cancelled. There's still one TOG-2 left at the Bovington Tank Museum that you can see today.
Tog, 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 Tog. Admiral Toggington, the Wiener Tog, Tog door. Yeah. Oh, I love the Tog. The hot Tog. I love the Tog.
This beauty all the way from the City of Lights may have run away from you at first, but don't worry, she's a real collaborator at heart. Give it up for the Char 2C. Let's hear it, everybody. Char 2C, what's up?
The Char 2C looks like someone took an FT17 and elongated it in Photoshop.
Oh, God, the Char 2C. Okay, fun fact, by the way. This isn't even its final form. See, there's the Char B. This is the Char 2C. And then there's the Char F2C. Char 2C.
Hey, how you doing? Well, I'm doing just fine. I lied, I'm dying inside.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so, yeah, this is the Char 2C. Like, Fountain's right, Char 2C. But yeah, the Char 2C. But, let me, oh boy. But, let me show you guys, how much worse it actually gets. 1 second. One second. Give me a second. Oops. Sorry, that was me sending a message to a friend. Give me a second. Give me a second. Let's see. Then there's the Char Aznable. No. I've come here to laugh at you. No. Let me show you guys how far it actually gets. We're going to see the Char F2C. Let's see.
Bigger.
It's like or was it this? Hold on a minute. Make sure I looked up the right thing. Okay. Okay, I got it wrong. It's not the Char F2C, it's the FCM F1. So, God, this is so stupid. Okay, so you guys will recall that I said that the Char 2C is not its final form. Oh, God, this hurts me. It hurts. Unfortunately, there's not many pictures of this thing, so y'all are going to have to make do with what I can grab here. But, well, give me a second. Let's find a good one. I guess that'll work. Not really. Hold on. Got it. This one will work. So, you guys want to see it get even worse? Uh-oh. Why did my camera... Really? VTube Studio, quit turning off. Stop that. Why didn't y'all tell me my camera turned off? How dare. Anyway, give me a second. Turn my thing back on here. There we go. So, because guess what? It gets so much worse. You guys ready? You're not ready. But I'm going to show you anyway. Brace yourselves. So, to remind everyone, FT17, that's the little one. Char 2C is the big one. FTC F1. Because fuck it. Look upon this monstrosity and be horrified. This is a Char, and this is what is known as a Char that's ascended past a Char, or you could call it the Char 2. Why does that? Why does the taco bowl have treads? boy. So, again, this is just one of the designs for it. Another design for it would have two twin cannons right here, and then an even bigger cannon in the back. It's so dumb. It's so dumb. Anyway, let's get back to the, because land navy. All right, here we go. Back to the real thing. The Chartreuse.
Bigger.
Are we really going to call it that now? The Chartreuse? I hate that, but Fountain made a good point.
This design was actually developed during World War I and was planned to be used during the offensives of 1919 had the war not ended. Because of this, it had many World War I era elements to its design, but also a few forward-thinking ones, including a 3-man turret and interleaved road wheels. The tank required a small village of 12 men to crew that included 4 machine gunners and a radio operator. Although missing out in the combat of World War I, 10 of these tanks were activated during the French mobilization of 1939, and during this time there were various upgrades made in an attempt to modernize the vehicle, mostly by upgrading the armor, but were held back and used for propaganda purposes as the French High Command realized that they would do more good there than in combat given the realities of the war. Do you see a theme developing? During the Battle for France in 1940, however, 6 operational tanks of the 51st Battalion were lost in fighting near the Meuse-Semouse station, with a few being captured by the Germans in eastern France.
Grab your oil reserves, hold down your fortifications, because this baby's gonna get you. Eventually, somehow gonna be shipped from the US to here. It is the T-95. Let's make some fucking oil.
This is the first design we'll be discussing that actually had World War II in mind.
Behold the T-95 Doom Turtle. And yes, it was from Girls in Panzer.
But was created, ironically, after running into World War I type problems. Once the Allied troops reached the German border, they ran into the German defenses of the Siegfried Line, and although a good amount of its defensive capability had been stripped to fortify the Atlantic Wall, it had proven a fairly difficult obstacle to get through. The American and British response to this was to create some super heavy anti-tank shell immune vehicles to just pile drive right through. The British created the Tortoise, and the Americans created this, the T-95 Doom Turtle. Not actual name. A super heavy self-propelled gun weighing 86 tons and mounting a high-velocity 105mm gun. The vehicle was designed to be 6 tons and mounting a high-velocity 105mm gun.
Yes, 105 millimeters. For those who don't know, that was the size of the gun that the original M1 Abrams had mounted on it before it got upgraded to a 120 millimeter. 105 millimeters of firepower, because fuck you.
The vehicle was designed to be able to absorb shots from German 88mm high-velocity guns and carried 4 sets of tracks on a bogie suspension to help displace the weight. The vehicle did have a lot of problems though, being very underpowered, which resulted in many breakdowns and just the simple fact that with it being so heavy, it would have been a nightmare to ship over to Europe. Never mind finding rail cars that could transport it to the sector it needed to be in. Before the project was completed, the Siegfried Line was overrun, but the vehicle continued testing into 1947 to learn about potential future super heavy designs, but was cancelled once the military realized how ineffective super heavy vehicles were and decided they would no longer pursue research. Of the 2 prototypes created, one is still in existence. After being lost in the field for 30 years, it was taken to the Patton Museum, and since it closed, is now in storage at Fort Benning and will be on display in 2020 when the museum opens.
Bonus! Hooray!
The Bob Semple tank.
Oh boy, the Bob Semple. Okay. So, the Bob Semple. I don't know what to say here. I'm sorry that you guys are about to be cursed with this, but...
Named after the New Zealand Minister of Works, took advantage of the most cutting-edge technology available, including a tractor base and corrugated iron armor. Oh Jesus, what am I doing? Extremely heavy for its components, ranging from 20 to 25 tons, its tractor gearing could not handle the sheer power the vehicle commanded, causing slow speeds, breakdowns, and the need to stop to change gears.
Yes, you heard that right. To change gears, it had to stop. So you had to stop, shift gears, and then start it up again. Sir, that's a stack of crackers on treads.
Its 6 Bren guns were very inaccurate when firing from their mounts. This was deemed negligible though, as the sheer sight of it on the battlefield would render enemies motionless without even being hit. Unfortunately, this wonder weapon was never able to see service due to the Japanese never invading New Zealand. But then again, the Japanese probably never invaded New Zealand because the Bob Semple tank was present. To my knowledge, there are no Bob Semple tanks left. But you know what they say, the light that burns brightest does not burn for long. Thank you again to War Thunder for sponsoring another episode of Me.
We're not done, there's more.
This is the biggest target we've uncovered since Bin Laden.
Yeah, nobody cares.
Mr. Arnold? Mr. Arnold? John, I'm in.
Great. Down. Ahead of you is a metal staircase. Go down it.
Okay. Going down.
After 20 or 30 feet, you come to a T-junction. Take a left.
Just down from the main cable channel.
I understand how to read a schematic.
Damn it. Dead end.
World War II was largely miserable for just about everybody involved. Whether your home was destroyed, or you had to forcibly move, lost family members, or were just flat out killed, it wasn't really something you would enjoy being in or would want to return to. But for one group of people, it was a great and extremely unique time to hone their craft, tank designers, where after the 20-year period of the interwar era, they could put their designs to the test and get feedback almost immediately on new ideas that were sent to the front. However, as tanks were a relatively new concept still, even arguably when they finally saw use in their second major conflict, a lot of ideas that looked great on paper or had worked better in the past did not pan out quite as well in reality. Here are some developmental dead ends that were produced in the interwar and World War II era.
Definitely not good.
This is one that, with the power of hindsight, provokes many questions as to why it was a thing. As all modern tanks, and all of the really successful ones of the past, only have a single turret, and it's become one of the pillars of tank design. But in the late 20s and early 30s, when most of the following designs popped up, it came from what seemed like a relatively simple answer to a complex question. How do you give a tank more firepower and the ability to take on multiple and various kinds of targets? And this idea of just sticking a bunch of guns on something to fix the problem was not really a new one. If you look at pre-Dreadnought ships, for example, hosts of guns were fitted to them before ship designers realized that the answer to this was a bit more complicated. And these gigantic land ships exemplify this concept through the eyes of tank designers, with just about every major power, and even some minor ones, experimenting with multi-turret designs. The British tinkered with ideas such as the Medium Mark III and the A1E1 Independent. The Japanese experimented with the Type 95 and Type 91 heavies. The Soviets created quite a few, including the T-35, the T-100, and SMK, and even the Germans got involved with the Nüberfeldzug. Hope I'm saying that right. Out of all these designs listed, only the T-35 and that one saw any sort of extended combat, with some of the Soviet prototypes being tested on the front in the Winter War. And the results of their actions were not stellar. The new whatever project was cancelled in the 30s after 5 prototypes, but were used in the invasion of Norway, mostly for that good propaganda footage, but they suffered from reliability problems and lack of armor protection compared to how big of a target the thing was, losing many crew members to anti-tank rifles. The T-35 has an even worse story, as it was rushed to the front with all available tanks in 1941 to slow the German invasion, but were lost in scores from reliability problems. Some sources say up to 90% from this.
And it wasn't just that, they were also bombed the fuck out of existence. Because the T-35 was super duper slow. And this is Operation Barbarossa, where massive amounts of Stukas are literally flying all over Soviet airspace. And if you're going to have a flight of Stuka dive bombers flying overhead, and there's something down below that's big, fat, and slow, you are basically asking that Stuka you're basically saying, please, bomb me. I'm right here. And the Stukas will reply with, I bet. Yeah, I'm so tired. Please kill me. Yeah, that's basically the T-35 in a nutshell. Ain't got time for them slow boys. Hey, Soul, how you doing? Yeah, I'm having a great day. Ain't got time for them slow boys. They lost a ton of, no, not just to that. The T-35s were mostly had 90% casualty rates because, one, in blitzkrieg style tactics, if tanks come across something heavy like this, they go around it and they just pick it off in a wolf's pack like style. But again, why do that when you can literally have Stuka dive bombers just pound it from the air?
and were abandoned by crews and blown up whenever possible to keep them from falling to the Germans.
Yes, because the Germans would totally want a piece of shit like this, sure.
These reasons, among a few others we'll get into in a second, are why all the other prototypes previously mentioned were cancelled before they could go into production and see any service. There's a whole host of problems that begin to appear once you start actually operating one of these multi-turret tanks. The first is just commanding the thing. A tank commander's job is already pretty busy with one turret and one gun. Adding on more is not going to increase your firepower, but in reality actually kind of diminish it, because the commander needs to spot targets for you and can only do this one at a time. So instead of a gigantic monster firing in all directions, you get a gigantic target that can't see anything and is probably firing less than other vehicles with just one gun. Which brings us to the second problem. These things were huge and very heavy, even for their time, and often, because of their large size, had to keep armor relatively thin to keep weight down, as previously shown in the Nuba Fersafa. Combine this with the large size, and this is an anti-tank gun crew's wet dream. Reliability was also almost universally a problem. There were other attempts to fill the developmental spot that multi-turret tanks were trying to in a much more successful way, i.e. a range of firepower for multiple uses such as the Char B and M3 Lee having both turreted anti-tank and hull-mounted infantry support 75mm guns. But even these, to create the space for both armaments, were very large and very tall and ended up also being abandoned later. There are a couple other examples, such as a few versions of the Crusader that had a turret for the hull machine gun, but this too was eventually scrapped. So although a valiant effort and something probably worth a try before we knew what we know now, multi-turreted designs have taken their place in history as a very solid dead end.
Also, because someone mentioned the Baneblade. Thing is, most of the Baneblade's weapons are fully automated control. Someone is literally sitting in a chair using like what it basically is equivalent to a video game controller, and controlling the sponson weapons. Like literally, if I remember from the book Baneblade by Guy Haley, one guy is basically sitting at a screen and can see exactly what both sponsons see. So. And the charge to the last cannons and the rounds from for the heavy bolters are automatically fed to the weapons. So all he has to do is look at the screens and just use these joysticks to aim the sponsons. So, one guy, two guns. All right, have a good night, Nick.
Enlisted is the free, brand new online World War II shooter. Command a squad of soldiers.
Ironically, Enlisted is also made by Gaijin Entertainment, the same people who made War Thunder.
And participate in legendary battles of the South.
It's a dead end.
Hey, Bill, would you help me program my guns? Oh, wait, I have a cannon, like the rest of the world.
Why, you?
The idea for tankettes goes back to World War I, back when you assumed the gender of tanks, and vehicles with cannons were classified as male, and the ones with only machine guns were classified as female, hence the name tankette. And was also based on a fairly simple idea that just ran headlong into reality, being that machine gun kill a lot of people, but people kill machine gunner. Machine gunner have to hide behind things, but then he no reach people. So put machine gunner in bulletproof box that moves and go get people. And don't get me wrong, this concept did work in certain scenarios. Female tanks in World War I, before any anti-tank weapons really existed, did a good job of taking the fight to the enemy if properly supported. And in other conflicts, like the Spanish Civil War, tankettes could be extremely useful in fighting lightly armed infantry. Due to their smaller size, if given a powerful enough engine, they could be and were used for speedy reconnaissance.
Oh yeah, and some light tankettes had fucking flamethrowers attached to them. And I don't know about you, but if I saw something that could probably drive around 20 miles per hour off-road, chasing me and shooting a flamethrower at me, yeah, no, I'd run as fast as I could too.
The problem, though, comes when you run into anything that is capable of destroying a tank. Or, if you're really unlucky, another tank armed with a cannon, because you simply can't compete anymore. Like multi-turrets, but to a larger degree, tankettes were experimented with by basically everyone, and there are a lot of models that you can look to. The most successful use would probably be the German tank force for most of the Blitzkrieg years, relying heavily on the Panzer I only mounting machine guns, and the Panzer II with the 20mm autocannon.
The Panzer II Lux, for those who've never seen it before, the Panzer II Lux, that's Luchs, had a 20mm autocannon in it and holds the record, at least in my opinion, and many other people's opinion, as the cutest tank of World War II. Because the Panzer II is adorable. No, Panzer II looks. Hold on, I'll get y'all a picture. Give me a second. And I know it sounds weird to say that a tank is adorable, but trust me, this is the cutest tank ever. Hold on. Let's see. Got it. Let's see. Hold on. Yeah, it's a stock photo, but who cares? All right. Here we go. Look at it. It's adorable. Look at that. It's a little light tank. It's adorable. Yeah, the Herbie of tanks. Yeah. It's an adorable little thing with its 20mm autocannon and machine gun. But yeah. And the Goliath was not a tank. The Goliath was a tracked mine. So it doesn't count.
That, although better than just a machine gun, did have its shortcomings. But the Germans were able to take over most of Europe with this. But they achieved this by doing a very good job of pairing their Panzer Is and IIs with heavier tanks such as the Panzer III, IV, and 38T that had proper cannons on them so that the shortcomings were reduced, bringing up the heavier vehicles when the need arose. But although this is an example of a success, it also really illustrates the issues of a tankette. Most tanks it runs into will have a cannon, and most anti-tank guns it runs into will have a gun shield. So you either need to concentrate these vehicles and accept the losses, or, as I said, pair them with vehicles that have stronger armaments that can deal with these threats, just like the Germans did. Because of these issues, tankettes very quickly disappeared from the battlefield outside of being the odd infantry support vehicle along with heavier vehicles, or being used strictly behind the lines. It is only countries with weaker industrial bases that cannot retool factories or redesign weapons very quickly, such as Italy and Japan, where you see these.
Sorry, Gun Sage, I'm not using a PNG. You have to use the you have to use Grow the Imp. My apologies. But how you doing, bud? Wait, hold on. I think I can let me give you your points. You know what? Actually, no. I'll just do it for you. Don't worry. I'll let me give you your point. Let me do this real quick. Give me a second. And there we go. There you go. Okay.
War with okay to bad results. But these examples shouldn't be taken as an illustration of the tankette's capability, but an illustration of the lack of industrial capability of the countries that stuck with them. A handful of what you could maybe describe as tankettes exist today, but they tend to fill more specific roles now, and mount additional weapon systems to give them more of a punch, such as guided anti-tank rockets, and see use in very limited numbers.
Spike, you want it, huh?
Anything on sonar? I got nothing.
Okay. Can I just say I'm sick of stuff like this? I'm sick of giant shark movies. I'm sick of giant dinosaur movies. We get it. The ocean is scary.
Including all the legendary items, skills, and...
I'm fired, aren't I?
Oh, you think?
What can I say, Rick?
Nothing you haven't said before.
Tank destroyers are a fairly weird anomaly, as they are one of those things, like half-tracks, that were used widely by nearly every nation, performed their job well, but were pretty much completely scrapped after the war. Tank destroyers showed up as a sort of stopgap at a very particular point of tank design where nothing was universal yet, and the idea of what roles a tank was to be used in were still up in the air and varied greatly from army to army, with light, medium, and heavy tanks rolling around with various types of armor and armament. The different countries had different approaches to handle it. For a lot of countries, such as the Soviet Union and Germany, the tank destroyer was an easy and cost-efficient way to mount a large gun on an existing chassis. Just remove the turret, add a casemate, put in the biggest gun you can fit on it to kill enemy tanks, and you're off. No expensive and time-consuming chassis redesign, and the final product is much cheaper too because you don't have to tool all the parts for the moving turret. If you're the United States, on the other hand, and you don't need to worry about tooling because you got all those thick factories, you create an open-top turret to house a large gun that can be brought up when threats arise. Although the types, reasons for using, and implementation of tank destroyers vary from country to country, they're used the world over and gain much respect from the crews that use them and the soldiers that fought alongside them. My favorite tank, in fact, is in the form of a tank destroyer, the Jagdpanther. Look at them curves and that aesthetic. But despite everything they had going for them, they pretty much disappear entirely after the Second World War, outside of surplus equipment that was used, and do not see many developments save a few. The reason for this is that after World War II, in the beginning of the main battle tank / sort of still in the large heavy tank era, the firepower that was being put on a tank destroyer was fairly regularly already being put on a tank in a way that it was extremely effective and could deal with about all threats it encountered. So there was no reason to sacrifice the flexibility of having a turret for a bigger gun, when at this point the slightly smaller or equally sized gun that you have can do the job the tank destroyer was going to do. On top of this, in peacetime there was no need to rush vehicles to the front, and the time and money you saved by creating tank destroyers wasn't really a factor anymore. For example, you could make a tank destroyer out of the Abrams chassis, housing a bigger gun, but the Abrams already has a very good gun with extremely effective modern ammunition, so it becomes a redundancy at the cost of losing the flexibility a turret provides. So although tank destroyers were very successful, they were moved away from and pushed into the dead-end bin once better tanks had replaced their role for firepower.
The other problem was tank destroyers are a niche thing. Tank destroyers are designed to do one thing and one thing only. Fight other, like, kill tanks. That's it. They do have some of their some of them might have high explosive shells, but not many of them. And the thing is, after World War II, the idea became to focus more on tools, equipment, and weapons that are multi-role. Things that can do multiple things. Hence the main battle tank concept. A tank that can do everything. So, yeah, there wasn't really a need for a niche thing anymore. Yeah, destroy ground armor. That's it.
I'm sorry. You're a hero, and you have to leave.
So just to restate what I said a few times in the various parts, outside of the large multi-turret designs, none of these tanks were universally unusable. They were just looking for the answer to the same question of how to use these new vehicle developments correctly, be it specialization, universal capabilities, or emphasis on firepower. But at the end of the day, they were not the right answer and were moved on from in pursuit of the perfect combination of the weapon, though some of them did have a role for the time.
Alright, on to the next one. I think there's a fifth one. There should be. Hold on. Let me check his channel so y'all can see some of the stuff he's done. Let's see. Yeah, there is. Here it is. Oh no. Everywhere you look. Everywhere you look. Hey, Megiddo. Yeah, I know, right? Probably a copyright strike. Oh, fuck. That's true, actually. Oh, shit. I should probably skip this. Oh, shit. Yeah, I should probably skip this. I think I'm gonna get in trouble, too. Oh, boy.
By the free-to-play online game War Thunder. Go to my link in the description for a free premium tanker aircraft and 3 days of premium time for signing up. More on that in a second. In the last few iterations of meme tanks, I've gone with themes for the videos and the vehicles selected. But the other day, I went back and watched Meme Tanks 2, probably my favorite one if I'm being honest, and decided that for this one, I really want to go back to the old system of picking 3 for no specific reason other than they make me laugh. Something that I think has been lost in translation with the recent videos. With a lot of people thinking a meme tank means a bad tank, when a lot of the designs I pick are actually really capable vehicles, they just have some sort of quirk or thing that sets them apart that makes them memeable. A phenomenon that I think is perfectly relayed in our first vehicle.
Does the Russian death fridge count as a meme tank? Yes, it does.
And remember, you only take it when you need it.
The Vickers 6-ton was actually a fairly old tank by the time it was being used on a large scale. Designed in 1928 by the Vickers Armstrong Company, it was a fairly cheap, simple, and reliable tank that, after working out some of the kinks and going through a few different model types, was presented to the British Army, where it was quickly rejected by them. They had more important things to invest in, like Christie suspension, and felt that the 6-tonner didn't have the cross-country capability they wanted. It was at this point, though, that it was put onto the world market as a type of low-cost form of armor design, and like a brand-name wonder drug, began being sold all over the world to cure armies of armor-tile dysfunction. Are you having trouble with home defense? Is your neighbor's military might interfering with your daily life? Talk to your Minister of Defense about Vickers 6-ton, a cheap and effective way to secure your military might and secure your borders.
You only take it when you need it. Fun fact! The Polish army had some Vickers 6-tons in their arsenal when the Germans invaded. In September of 1939. Those Vickers 6-tons fucked up a lot of German tanks. Now again, there weren't many Vickers, so they weren't able to turn the tide or anything. But anytime a Panzer I or Panzer II came across a Vickers 6-ton, the Vickers 6-ton blew them away. So,
don't let your enemies keep you from running your own country, and get the defensive power that you need. Make the switch to an armored battalion of Vickers 6-ton today. Ask your generals if your military is healthy enough for war. Do not import Vickers 6-tonners if your country is under military sanctions. Side effects may include increased fuel consumption, larger numbers of enemy anti-tank guns, and dependence on roads for transport. To avoid long-term attrition, get diplomatic help for a conflict lasting more than 4 years. The Vickers 6-ton. The design really came into its own when the generic version of the tank in the form of foreign developments began being created locally by several countries, most notably the Polish 7TP and the Soviet T-26, which they created in eye-watering numbers of up to 11,000 in upwards of 53 different variants, which were themselves exported to other countries from the Soviet Union, showing up in conflicts like the Spanish Civil War and in China against the Japanese. You'd even have Vickers-type models fighting other Vickers-type models during the Soviet invasion of Poland and during the Winter War, where the Finn used their own 6-ton tanks, not to very good effect, against T-26s, but later capturing and reusing T-26s against Soviet T-26s in the Continuation War. By the late 30s, the Vickers design had replaced the FT for the world's idea of what tanks were supposed to be, and was one of the designs most widely used in these small conflicts popping up, eventually culminating in the Second World War. It was British engineering that was being used as one of the biggest mechanical death-dealing machines across the planet, creating a very understandable sense of patriotism in British subjects, looking back on their ingenuity, driving forward the tools of war-making, showing that the influence of British ideas was not waning, although their empire may have been, announcing to the world that
Enlisted.
Oh my gosh.
The large-scale multiplayer first-person shooter featuring infantry.
Look, Gaijin, I know I'm watching a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of War Thunder stuff thanks to Potential History. Stop spamming me with these commercials. I have Enlisted. I just don't play it on stream.
Vehicles and
Operators, Bolivia, Kingdom of Bulgaria, the Republic of China, Finland, Germany, the Kingdom of Greece, the Kingdom of Italy, the Empire of Japan, Paraguay, the Second Polish Republic, Portugal, and more.
The development of better anti-tank guns, though, caused the demise of the machine, with the last large-scale use of them being in 1945 in Manchuria by the Red Army against the Japanese.
The OI. So let me explain this. The OI is the closest you're going to get to a real-life Baneblade. I'm serious. It's probably the closest we'll ever get to a real-life Baneblade, and we don't know what happened to it. Potential History will explain, but yeah, as says the mysterious Lady of the Lake, we don't know what happened to this thing.
The OI is a Japanese super heavy tank that was largely forgotten until it was catapulted into common knowledge from being included in a lot of tank simulator games. The gigantic multi-turreted design really sticks out from the other tanks used by the Japanese military that are known for being smaller, lighter designs originating in the 1930s. This vehicle, like many other things to do with the Japanese army, was once again a result of the Japanese army's rough experience in Mongolia against the Soviets in 1939. The Japanese Chief of Army Affairs after the incident ordered Colonel Matra of the 4th Technical Research Institute to create a, quote, giant chariot used as a mobile pillbox on the vast plains of Manchuria, with the idea being that this large vehicle, immune to anti-tank guns, would be the spearhead of a Japanese attack accompanied by lighter tanks and mobile infantry that would be able to destroy enemy anti-tank gun positions and open up the way for the rest of the armored force. And the requirements for the tank were that it was to be about twice the weight and size in all areas as the Type 95 heavy tank. The project began its life under the name Mito, and similarly to the supersized battleships that the Japanese made, the project for the supersized tanks was extremely secretive. The plans were ready by 1941 and construction began. The lack of funding and the extreme secrecy of the project dragged the whole process out into 1943, about 4 times longer than was planned. Once finally completed enough for testing, it was renamed the OI, and on the day of testing, it's claimed to have weighed 96 tons, excluding the turret, and 75 millimeters of bolt-on front armor.
96 tons and that much frontal armor. Tell me, chat, does anyone want to tell me what 96 tons, does to a tank? Does anyone want to imagine that? Yeah, 96 tons without the turret is big. Yeah.
During trials, the vehicle damaged its suspension and sunk into the mud.
Well, there's your answer. It damaged its own suspension and sank into the mud.
Once it was recovered and fixed, it was tested again on a concrete surface that apparently utterly destroyed and damaged its suspension again, to where it was eventually scrapped sometime in 1943 or 44, possibly after some time sitting untouched in a field in one of the testing grounds. And all that is left of the vehicle today is a single track link. Now, this is the official story of the OI. But as some of you may know, it's a whole lot more complicated than that. A lot of the information about the tank comes mostly from the memories of engineers who worked on it, with only a few documents to back up their claims with. For example, in Hara's book, he says that the main gun was 105 millimeters, whereas design documents and blueprints say it was 150. And there are—
Jesus fuck! So, wait a minute. The 105 millimeter was already insane. But the main technical specifications call for a 150 millimeter cannon. Are you mad? So, to put that into perspective for everyone, that is more than 5 inches. A 5-inch gun, 127 millimeters, was mounted on destroyers. This thing had a bigger gun than a destroyer. I am flummoxed. I am bamboozled. How? Were you just expecting to park this in front of the Imperial Palace and then just, what, turn it into a roadblock? Were you expecting it to get anywhere?
There are all sorts of discrepancies like this with the design. The total weight for a long time was thought to be 150 tons.
150 tons, you say?
But that's recently been called into question and regarded as untrue. Even within the story of the tank's development, there are a lot of discrepancies to do with the timeline, how many prototypes were built, and how the thing was scrapped. If it even was scrapped, with some saying that it was dropped into a lake after surviving until 1945, and so on. Everywhere I looked when researching for this video, I got different answers, with a lot of articles and book chapters basically ending with this big shrug and the authors saying that they just don't know for sure. In 2015, original documents were found and purchased by the Fine Molds company to make models with, and they allow people to look at the documents after paying a rather steep price to do so. But a lot of people who have done this didn't cite their sources for what they later write about on the OI, which may be some kind of legal thing as part of being able to see them. And the whole story is just a mess, and one of the biggest head scratchers as far as World War II tanks go, and a really unique story for a vehicle, which makes the OI, for me, the most mysterious tank of World War II, having one of the most memeable traits with the sheer amount of mystery surrounding it.
Hi there, it's me, John Chess, inventor of chess. And are you sick of sucking
Get the fuck out of here. Nobody insults the game of kings in my stream. Chess is the game of kings, and you will not insult it with memes and bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
Damn, boy. Damn!
In the early days of the channel.
Damn! Alright. The Sturmtiger. Oh, boy. Ooh, the Sturmtiger. Oh, boy.
I made a video about the Sturmtiger. And even though the video did pretty well, I get requests for it to be in a Meme Tanks video all the time. And you know I'm here to please.
Nice.
The Sturmtiger was a late war variant of the bunker bus.
Look at that! Look at that! Look at that! Look at that! Look at that schnoz!
Infantry support vehicle. Because as German tanks got big dickier, this categories of vehicles got bigger as well, and you know the joke I'm gonna make. The Sturmtiger, created out of surplus late war Tiger I hulls, with the exception of the prototype being on an early war chassis, mounted a 380mm L5.4 chip gun that, unlike previous vehicles of this type, actually used a two-stage rocket system.
Yes. So it's like a bolter. Rocket-powered projectile. Did they really circumcise a tank? Well, I mean, you don't gotta say it like that, but I mean, maybe. But yeah, 380 millimeter rocket-powered projectile.
First stage, blowing the projectile from the barrel, and the second stage being a rocket propulsion system inside the projectile that would launch the monstrous warhead to its target. And all these vehicles were pretty scruffy. As I mentioned in previous videos, the Germans are notorious for changing a lot of features on their tanks within a production run. But the Sturmtiger takes this to a whole new level, with changes being made between each of the 18 units built. Mostly as a product of being developed and manufactured kind of at the same time. Once created, they were split up into 3 armored assault mortar companies, with Company 1000 seeing the first and only time the vehicle was used in its role at the Warsaw Uprising, where it knocked buildings down as it was intended to. The vehicles also saw service in the Ardennes Offensive and around Remagen, with a less than stellar performance as they were often found abandoned by the side of the road by bewildered GIs after they ran out of fuel or ammunition and could not keep moving. And the vehicle itself is really a fun quirk in the annals of armored warfare, and as I said in my previous video, really kind of sums up to me how out of touch a lot of the German army was with their actual position in the war at this point. Spending resources on a vehicle...
That's basically what a bolt round looks like from a bolter. And I should point out that to load this thing, see that crane on the top? Yeah, that is to reach to the back of the vehicle, grab one of the 380mm rocket shells, lift it up, bring it forward, and then lower it down so someone can push it into the gun. Yeah. It didn't carry many rockets, as you can imagine.
That is intended for offensive capabilities when they've been on their back foot for a good while now. And if you ask me, the real genius of this design lies in the additional escape hatch via the gun tube that the...
Yeah, and you know your cannon on your tank is enormous if a full-sized man can fit in it.
Vehicle provided. You know, they say the Sherman was the most survivable tank of the war, but you can't launch yourself out of the gun of a burning Sherman. You gotta get yourself out using a lame old hatch there. And this is the real kind of German ingenuity that has kind of brought me around to see what all those angry people in my Germany Can't Win World War II videos as comment sections are on about. You may only have a handful of shells, and it may be a near Herculean task for the only 4 crew members allotted to the vehicle to load and fire the thing. But being able to slide out of the gun tube like an absolute mad lad in a time of emergency, now that takes some real engineering foresight. Thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this.
Alright, now, that's all the meme tank videos. However, we are going to watch a few more things, because he's got a few more in here. So, God, okay, you know what? We're just going to scoot down here for a minute. So, I've talked about this meme machine when I read through, when I was reading My Tank is Fight a few weeks ago, the Rata. And now, you guys are going to see a lot more about it. Let me put it this way. You guys thought the mouse was big? You haven't seen big.
We had made a tank for the army. And I looked at the first one that they built and I just said, it's okay, but we need to make it bigger.
Okay, so we made it bigger. And Pete came back and said, no, I need it bigger again. So we made it bigger. And everybody's going, oh my God, this thing's getting huge. It's totally impractical now. Well, it went from impractical to ridiculous. I mean, this thing was huge.
Peter Jackson isn't Hitler, it's just for jokes.
This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the easy and reliable way to build a website for yourself or your business. Use my code POTENTIALHISTORY for 10% off your first Squarespace order, but more on that a little bit later. One of the most popular topics to do with the Second World War are German tanks. And by German tanks, I mean the Gen 3 big cats, not those other boring, sensible designs. We want to hear about the big boys. And as the war went on, the designs got bigger and bigger, beginning with the Tiger and Panther and growing into the Mouse. Now Germany went bigger and better in hopes to negate the fact that they couldn't play the production game like other countries could. There were supposedly plans to go bigger though. Much bigger. And since I assume you've read the title, I'll stop teasing and get to the reveal. The Germans worked up a design for this. OKH Auftrag Nummer 30404, or the Rat, a 1,000-ton super tank.
1,000 tons. $1,000, ladies and gentlemen, with naval guns as its main weapon, a 105mm gun down here for close-in targets, and these are the sizes of other tanks compared to it. And you are correct, Mega Zero. It's not called a tank. It's called a Landcruiser, or land ship.
Now, before I go any further, I have to warn you that everything said and everything kind of known about this vehicle is kind of dubious. Kenneth Estes in his book points out that there's really not much solid information out there. I mean, there's one set of drawings that we kind of base a lot of this stuff off of, and a lot of the stories to do with it are very anecdotal. Assuming this was a serious design, though, here's the story. Dreamt up by a submarine designer at Krupp, the vehicle was to sit on 4-foot wide tracks, or multiple sets of tracks depending on how you interpret the designs, with 11 road wheels per side, powered by either 8 Daimler 20-cylinder marine diesel engines or 4 MAN marine diesel engines. That would, in theory, push it along at 25 miles per hour, and the power-to-rate ratio math does check out on that surprisingly. But we'll get...
So yeah, 25 miles per hour, but it's using fucking ship engines.
More to that on a second. It was to have armor ranging from 150 to 360 millimeters thick, and a range of weapons including 2 15mm 151/15 autocannons, 8 20mm anti-aircraft guns on the back deck, a 128mm anti-tank gun, whose placement is up for debate and varies depending on which artist's interpretation you look at, although in a turret on the back seems the least likely, as they wouldn't have been much use there, at least to oncoming enemy tanks, and a main armament of 2 280mm naval guns, and a rotating turret, most likely from the Gneisenau refit project that was cancelled. In fact, it is widely thought that this exact turret is the one they had in mind to put on.
Yeah, you know, a fucking battleship turret. Yeah. Some submarine guy was like, what if we mount battleship gun to tank?
The Rat. Although the turret had 3 guns and 2 are specified in the plans, so it's thought that one would be removed to make more space within the turret and cut down on weight. This could be something that was made as a serious design and something that the German army thought they needed and was requested and loved by Hitler. Or it could be something that a bunch of engineers drew up on a late night drinking kind of as a meme.
I'm willing to go with the latter, honestly.
That's something that I think is really not touched on as much as it should be when this vehicle is discussed. Most of the stuff we know about it is just kind of guessed. You can tell this through the huge variation in interpretations by artists. There are things that are moved in all different sort of places, and what the vehicle is going to look like is kind of a generalized concept, and there are a lot of specifics left out. So this is kind of the best I could find on an official story of an official design, but a lot of it is very much inferred, and I'm just going with the best things that I could come up with. This gets into one of the major problems that doesn't really make sense about this vehicle: the weight of the turret. Now, for most tanks, the actual weight of the turret is a fairly small percent of the overall weight.
What's next, a tank carrier? Please tell me I'm wrong. Well, from a logical perspective and a realistic perspective, yes, you are incorrect. But from a video game perspective, there is a game that I played where there is a vehicle capable of carrying 30 mouse tanks to a battlefield and then deploying them one after the other. We're not going to talk about that game. The game is shit, makes no goddamn sense, and spits in the face of any kind of historical accuracy you could ever hope to have. But yeah, in video games, tank carriers are a thing. Excuse me, what? Yeah, again, I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not... You know what? Fuck it. If someone here gives me 5 subs, I'll talk about the game. I will bring up a picture and I will talk about the game. I beat it, but I don't want to talk about it. I buried it in the recesses of my mind so I would never have to talk about it again. But if someone gifts 5 subs, or God forbid starts a hype train, I'll talk about it. But not before then. I do not want to drudge up that horrific part of my mind again. Playing through that game was torture. So much of it was torture. I hated it so much.
Of the vehicle.
I'm not telling you that. I do not want to relive that. No. I'm not going to talk about it. Like, no. If you want to know, then somebody has to give me 5 subs or y'all have to get a hype train started. Then I'll talk about it, but not before. Like I said, I don't... It just... No. The game's 15 years old, and I would like it to stay in the back of my mind where I never have to see it again with how it tortured me. I played through that whole game. I beat it. I can say that I beat it, and I never want to think about it again. It's so bad, and I don't want to remember it.
Tiger, for example, the turret is about 6.5 tons for a 50-ton vehicle. About 13% of the total weight. If we're using this as kind of a guideline in the area of what is acceptable, the Rat turret really flies in the face of this. The specific turret that I mentioned that was going to be put on the Rat weighed about 800 tons. With the gun taken off and a lot of estimates I've seen, it would end up weighing 600 tons, which would be 60% of the overall vehicle's weight. Meaning one of two things. The rest of the vehicle was going to be just 400 tons, and the turret was going to make up the majority of the weight of the vehicle, or more likely, given the fact that the hull, running gear, engine, everything else to do with the tank is usually much heavier than just the turret, the vehicle is going to end up being much, much, much heavier. We're talking double, maybe triple. This does go to show further, though, that these designs were very much in the early phase, not very well thought out, and once again, that you have to take a lot of this information with a grain of salt. Along with this, the Rat would have had other issues. For one, it's too heavy to cross any bridges, so it would have to ford rivers, which with its height of very tall...
Yeah, height of very tall!
it probably could have done for many of them, but probably not all, limiting its movement. Also, due to its size, it would have had to move to its deployment zone under its own power, and would probably need specialty roads built to do this, as it would easily destroy any normal roads it attempted to drive on, or really drive one track on. I imagine if built, they would opt to do it in pieces and do final assembly near the front, although that in and of itself would require a lot of infrastructure to set up. Because this is the Germans though, there was also an SPG version dreamt up as well, because if you make a chassis, there must be a TD or SPG version.
Enlisted is the
God damn it, stop it, Gaijin.
free brand new online World War II. The pay 10 legendary
That was a joke.
Using the 80cm Schwer
Oh yeah, the monster. I told y'all about this one too. The one with the giant 800mm cannon. Yeah.
Gustav gun that got about as far in the design process as the Rat did. But I'm not going to get into it here, just know it exists. So, obviously this thing was never built. It was canceled by Albert Speer in 1943. It had been dreamt up probably sometime around 1942.
Oh. That's right, Andrea. You weren't here for that. You missed the stream where I was reading from My Tankus Fight. Oh, that's your fault. I'm not telling you about it. Just go look up I think it's like just go look up German Monster. Like, it's literally was called Codename the Monster.
Didn't get very far, was not built for very intelligent reasons. However, because this is Tank Files, and I gave the Tsar tank a fair shake and talked about how it could have possibly been used and maybe been successful, I'm going to try to do it for this thing. And as it's normally shown, you know, fighting on the front lines and stuff like that, it probably would have very quickly fallen to a death of 1,000 cuts. One single shell is not going to take this thing down, but if it's swarmed by infantry, shot up a lot by a lot of other guns, you know, its main armament's taken out, on frontline service, this thing would not do well. The one way in which I think this thing might have done well, though, is say you make 3 of these. You assign one to each army group during the invasion of the Soviet Union. Now, this thing was thought up after the invasion of the Soviet Union, so we're already in something that could not have happened, but just bear with me. Maybe it has a role during the Kursk offensive, I don't know. But if you have one behind each army group, and it's not doing the frontline fighting, but in the rear, kind of following along with the general offensive, you could use it in the role of indirect fire supporting frontline troops. Radio man says, hey, there's this big building with enemy, or there's this fortress with enemy, or there's a trench of enemy. Here are the coordinates, lob huge shells at it, soften them up. The largest gun actually used by the Germans in the war, the Gustav cannon, was actually used kind of in this role during the siege of Sevastopol. You had people on the ground radioing targets back to it, and it was shooting shells over a great distance. I believe part of it was just over the Black Sea. I'll put something up on the screen, but the area in which it was firing was from very far away.
Yeah. As you can see, couldn't find a map, but the Gustav gun fired 47 kilometers. Jesus.
And it ended up being fairly effective in this role. It helped win the battle. Would the cost, the headache, and the amount of troops you would have to assign to this thing to keep it operational and not have it be taken down by fighter bombers or infantry if they broke through or something make it worth it to do that job?
No.
No. You could do the job just as easily with smaller artillery firing in a group or fighter bombers or something else like that. But
how accurately, though? Does it matter? It's battleship grade shells. Like, battleship grade shells, you don't have to be pinpoint accurate with it. Even a near miss is going to plow the ground.
If you were to build it and you needed a roll for it, there you go. And if you're wondering, the thing did not actually get far enough in its development process to have an intended role assigned to it. So what it would have been used for is anyone's guess. The amount of people needed to work, maintain, and defend this thing, though, would have been massive. If you look at the Karl Garat mortars, which were used, and I guess would be one of the closest things to this thing that was actually used in the war, they had legions of troops, not just to fire and maintain it, but also you had to have a bunch of people defending it because it was really slow. Take what had to be used to defend those things and multiply it by 100 for this. You would need air superiority to make sure that it wasn't taken out by enemy planes, all the people working the anti-aircraft guns and stuff. The crew for this thing was said to be 40 to 60 I think that's a little generous. I think it would be more, well above 100. And then you would need, you know, tank platoons defending this thing. You would need infantry. You would constantly need a squadron of planes up above to make sure you had air superiority to defend it. Just the cost in manpower is really enough to say this thing's not worth it. It'd be interesting to have seen them attempt to make it. And I'm really sad they didn't, because I'm guessing at least some of it would be left today, and it'd be really interesting to go see. I doubt they would leave it in one piece because, you know, that's a huge roadblock wherever it was left. That's a lot of valuable steel you could scrap on it to use for other things after the war. Ton of stuff after the war. Most of the stuff just left around, tank stuff like that, was scrapped for steel. This thing probably would have been, but, you know, maybe there would have been someone standing around to say, no, this is unique, don't scrap it, and we'd have one to look at today. Unfortunately for us, probably fortunately for the Germans, they never did build it. Although, it would be a hell of a story if they did. What do you guys think? Do you think this thing would have a role outside of what I said, and would it be worth it? I mean, big fuck you guns anywhere are, you know, that's a good thing to have at your back.
I think you just swear. Yeah, it is, but we have to be realistic, of course. And now there was one more about, let's see it. Hold on. Let's see, I know what to look for, so. Alright. And we've got to talk about it. The Ferdinand.
Johnny, and today we're going to talk about the Ferdinand Tank Destroyer, a very awesome and effective vehicle. Liar! No, it's actually a piece of garbage. The story of this vehicle begins in the late 30s, early 40s, when the German army decides that they need a heavier breakthrough tank for its forces. The German army had recently been noticing the shortcomings in its tanks, first when it invaded France and had trouble with heavier tanks such as the Char B, and then especially once they invade Russia and run into the T-34 and KV-1. And the main objective of this new tank was to mount the 88mm L56 high-velocity gun, which was the most effective tank-killing weapon that the Germans had at the time. Both the Henschel and Porsche companies were contracted to make prototypes, and the best one would win and get the contract. And it is from the Porsche prototype that the Ferdinand Tank Destroyer comes from. And oh man, it is quite the story.
Fucking thing
sucks!
Now Ferdinand...
Okay. Now, here's the thing. If you've watched Girls and Panzer, you know about the Porsche Tiger. After all, the Porsche Tiger was actually used by the, by the main character's team. But as you were about to see here, it had a lot of problems.
Porsche was nothing new to the military contract world. He'd been making weapons for the German army essentially since before World War I. And he was always fairly ambitious and trying to break new ground with his projects. And he very much kept to this theme with his Tiger bid. Instead of using a single engine design that through a drivetrain went to a transmission that powered the drive sprockets, Porsche decided to think outside of the box and use a petrol-electric generator drive. Now the way this works is you essentially have two gasoline or diesel engines that power two electric generators that then provide power to the drive sprockets at the rear of the vehicle, which then propels the vehicle forward. Now petrol-electric drive was nothing new at this point. It had been used on things like buses, but it had never been used on a very heavy armored fighting vehicle. And this became evident as soon as Porsche started putting his prototype together. He had mountains of problems getting the thing just to work. One of the biggest issues he had was to cram both engines and both generators into the size that the Tiger needed to be. He didn't have significant room for cooling, and oftentimes the engines overheated, malfunctioned, or just burst into flames. There was also the issue that the vehicle was just too heavy and woefully underpowered for what it needed to do, also causing catastrophic breakdowns and engine fires. And although some of these flaws were worked out before the submission, Porsche's prototype failed utterly against Henschel's submission. I mean, it was so bad that the engine failed and caught fire before it could really even start the trials or do anything. And actually, after much digging, I was able to find some colorized footage of that exact event.
Yeah, this scene should look familiar to anyone who's seen Girls and Panzer.
Now, after this large failure, the German army did the sensible thing and picked the Henschel version, and that eventually became the Tiger tank we all know and love. And this would be the end of the Porsche Tiger, and this whole disaster would have never been heard from again.
But...
except there was one problem. About 90 of them.
This right here, I don't know how industrial contracting works, but the fact that he went ahead and made 90 hulls, 90 of these things, thinking that he was going to win, only to lose ridiculously. I'm pretty sure at some point this should get you busted for wasting resources. But, well...
Porsche was so confident in his design that he had already begun producing hulls for his tank that didn't work. And once the Porsche design was turned down, Germany realized that they had just spent all this money, metal, and material creating all these hulls that would never be used.
Yeah, except Porsche used it without their permission. So, like, doesn't that give people, the German government, the right to, like, take the hulls and melt them down or something? I don't know.
So they had to use them for something. I personally think at that point you just take the loss, melt them down, turn them into some Stoogs or something, useful, but this is what they went with, and it's really dumb. It was decided that these rejected Tiger prototype hulls would be made into a tank destroyer that would be able to mount the 88mm L70 gun eventually seen on the Tiger II. To do this, a large superstructure for the gun was made that would be welded onto the back of the hull to make room for the additional loader and the large gun that was going to be there. Because of that, they had to take the engines and move them to the front of the vehicle because there wasn't any space for them in the back anymore, and along with this came a few upgrades in armor thickness. In the course of putting all these upgrades on, though, they increased the weight from around 59 tons to a little over 65 tons. Now, this doesn't seem like too much in the realm of super heavy vehicles, but this thing failed as the Tiger prototype due to its engines being overstressed by weight already. By adding all that tonnage on, you're just asking for more problems.
Ugh.
Once it was all said and done, about 90 Ferdinands had been created, along with one command tank that sported the Henschel turret like the original prototype, and a couple recovery vehicles. The vehicles were assigned to Tank Destroyer Battalions 653 and 654, with 45 vehicles in each unit respectively, and were shipped off to the Eastern Front to take place in Operation Citadel. Their performance, though, was about as you could expect, with many vehicles destroying themselves before they could even get into the fight, with issues like gas line fires and just engine failure. Even once in the field, a lot of mechanical problems plagued the crews, with many tanks having to be destroyed by their crews themselves once they had broken down. There's even a report of several Ferdinands being destroyed from engine failure when trying to climb a hill to get to a firing position.
The Ferdinand could not handle the ascent of the hill. We thought they had got hit by artillery, but after they caught fire, one after the other, we assumed that the engines were overheated and exploded. The crews got out and ran away.
Another issue people often bring up is the fact that it had no self-defense weapon, an MG34 in the hull or anything like that.
Yeah, they did not put a self-defense weapon in this. No machine gun, no nothing. So there was no way to protect itself from infantry if infantry got too close. So, yeah.
Although this was an issue, I think too much is made out of this. You gotta remember that most German tank destroyers didn't have a front-mounted machine gun. The Stug 3, the Hetzer, they didn't. And although they had roof-mounted machine guns, these were only supposed to be used in extreme emergency-type situations. The German doctrine for tank destroyers was to stay behind the line, shoot from afar. That's why they have some of the most powerful guns that the German army could produce. I think it's only at Kursk where you have this really weird sort of amalgamation of things, of tanks getting so close to each other and infantry being everywhere and just two lines completely smashing on top of each other, that you have the issue of infantry overtaking your tank. Because that didn't always happen a lot. And it oftentimes won't go very well.
For Pete's sake, stop it. I'm trying to watch the cool tank stuff. Go away, ads. And look, before someone asks, they're like, hey, how come you don't have ad blocker? Because I like making sure that the people I watch on YouTube get money. That's why.
Now, all that being said, when they weren't broken down and when they were being used in the role they were supposed to be used in, the Ferdinands did pretty well. Battalion 653, after the battle, reported destroying some 320 Soviet tanks and only losing 13 Ferdinands. So, not bad, I guess, but it still doesn't really seem worth it. After the battle, about 50 or so Ferdinands remained. Many complaints about the vehicle's shortcomings were made by their commanders, and in September of 1943, 48 of the remaining 50 vehicles were sent back to the factories to be retrofitted with upgrades. These included a close defense MG-34 mounted in a ball mount in the hull, a commander's cupola taken off the Stug 3, Zimmermann paste applied to most of the vehicle, a frontal armor increase, and the tracks being widened. Now notice, none of the major upgrades are to the engine or power system, and we have once again increased our weight from 65 tons to about 70 tons.
Oh, because, you know, just 5 more tons. 5 more tons, what's that going to do?
And at this point, I'm wondering why the Germans didn't just set them on fire themselves. Anyways, there was official name change on May 1st, 1944 from Ferdinand to Elephant to denote the changes between the two, and the vehicles were sent to Italy, a mountainous place.
Y'all can't see what I'm doing, but I literally have my head in my hands because you have multiple reports that your vehicles literally fucking explode from going up steep inclines. And your response is to not only increase the armor again, but then be like, oh, yeah, we send them to Italy. Send them to make them defensive positions. We send them to Italy. But Hans, there's so many hills and mountains in Italy. Ah! They won't need to worry about that.
Because why not? In Italy, the vehicles did okay when they could. The terrain isn't really suited for a long-range weapon since you're mostly fighting in the mountains. The breakdowns happen just as often because it was terrain that was giving them a problem anyways.
Yep.
A few of them saw service during the Vistula Oder offensive in January of 45, and 2 of them actually survived all the way to April of 45 to take place in the Battle of Berlin. Now, this summary is very quick and skips over a lot of details, but my main point in this video is...
What's wrong with y'all? You niggas are crazy!
Why would you...
What's wrong with y'all? You morons is crazy! Yeah, basically.
You take this thing that obviously didn't work, invest more time and money into it, just to make it more of a disaster, and waste all kinds of time and resources on it that you do not have. Germany was having all kinds of shortages mid to late war, and why you would invest resources that you don't have that many of in this train wreck is beyond me. And I think it sort of speaks to the German mentality going towards the war. We're going to make something that on paper is going to be really great, really awesome, have this big gun, have this big futuristic sort of drivetrain. But in reality, it doesn't work. And instead of just letting it go like any other country would, they just had to keep trying to field it and had to keep trying to make it better. The U.S.
You want to know the ironic thing? We, as in the United States,
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not?
It's just not. Here in the United States, we've fallen into that trap too. The United States has a big problem with its own, and this is public knowledge. You can look this up and find this out. The United States has this big problem when it comes to contracting or making equipment that when we've sunk enough money into it, even if it's not going to work or even if it's got problems, we really don't want to admit that we've wasted all that money on nothing. So we keep trying to make it work. And, yeah, no. It's a bad idea. That's exactly why the USS Zumwalt exists. And I've talked about the USS Zumwalt before. The, what did Niall call it? The, the source filmmaker error code ship. That literally looks like it was a model meant to be loaded into Source Filmmaker and it didn't load correctly. Yeah, coughs an M4, coughs more an M16. Yeah.
U.S. Army had a hell of a time coming up with the right design for the M26 Pershing, going through prototype after prototype to make sure they got it right. And you can say that Germany was in a time crunch, but so was the United States. They were desperately trying to get a heavier tank over to Europe, going so far as to set up factories and starting production runs for tanks that hadn't gone through their trials that then later had to be canceled because they realized the tank was bad. But that's just the thing. The Americans could decide when something was bad and then stop using it. The Germans, for some reason, have to just hold on to this thing and make it work when it's just not going to. And it's this kind of mentality that I think would ultimately cost them dearly in the war. if anyone else is a huge tank nerd like me, you'll be happy to know there are 2 of these things left, one pre and one post modification. The pre-modification Ferdinand is currently at the Kublinka Tank Museum in Moscow, Russia, and the post-modification example was captured by the Americans in Italy and currently resides in the Tank Museum in England, but lives in Fort Benning, Georgia, and we'll go back there in a few years.
Nice. So, that reminds me, because I'm going to mention this now. The whole thing about the Zumwalt. Let me paint you all a picture real quick. So here's the thing. The USS Zumwalt, as I've mentioned this before on stream. I've mentioned the Zumwalt a few times. Here's the thing. The Zumwalt was born out of this plan to basically be a multi-mission ship. It was designed to be something capable of giving sea-to-ground firepower, but also capable of being a destroyer of some type. Research and development program intended to design land attack ships for the U.S. Navy. This idea was pitched in 1994. Okay? We still don't have the Zumwalt. We've got 1. We were supposed to get 30. Then that was dropped as it continued to go over budget. Now we're only going to get 3. You want to know the funny thing, though? Is that there was a French design that is really fucking badass. So, I'm going to show you guys the French concept. Or, sorry, it's a French concept that we adopted. But I'm going to show you what we got and then what we could have had. Or, I'm sorry, what we were supposed to get and what we should have gotten. Are you guys ready for this? I have? Well, too bad. I'm showing it again. So, firstly, this is what we got. Granted, it doesn't look this cool because the USS Zumwalt only has 1 gun on it. It has 1 turret, not 3. The Zumwalt is a joke. Here's what we could have had. Motherfucking arsenal gear! Look at it! Look, it's literally called an arsenal ship. That thing has 500 vertical launch rocket systems. It can carry 500 rockets. Look at that. It is a floating rocket arsenal. Rocket and missile arsenal. This is the literal embodiment of fuck your ground forces, fuck your airplanes, fuck your Navy ships, I don't care. Isn't that first one from Oh, the Zumwalt? No. No, it's a real life thing. This, however, was a concept dreamt up by somebody. And I love it so much because it looks so freaking cool. But that's the thing. You don't always get what you want, right? Sometimes you get the shit. All right, we got time for one more thing. So let me see what we can watch here. Let me see. Trying to find some of the stuff he's done. I want to find another tank video.
No, I'm not defending German technical superiority. I'm stating the fucking obvious.
I love that quote.
Hi, my name's...
I love that quote. No, I'm not stating German technical superiority. I'm stating the fucking obvious. I love that. You know what? It's not, okay, it's not tanks, but, it's the end of the, I'm probably going to wrap this up, like, with this last video. It's not tanks, but it's still funny.
The Battle of Stalingrad.
Yeah, I don't, shut up and list it, I don't care. Oh, wow, okay, whoa! Star2D2, thank you for the raid. Wow, hi, everyone. I'm Zaruk Windcaller. Welcome to the Forest of Memories. Thank you for the raid. Wow, this is a lot. Who are you people? Thank you for the raid. I appreciate it. Wow. Thank you so much. It means a lot. Hi. What were y'all up to, Star, if you don't mind me asking? Actually, hold on. I can give you a shout out. Let's see. First of all, thank you. What are you doing here? How'd y'all find me? I feel like I'm, oh, the bunker. Oh my God. Please. Is the bunker good? Please tell me it's good. I've seen it. It looks really cool. I'm a big military history guy. Is it good? Please tell me the bunker is good. Awesome. It's good. Awesome. Oh, my model is awesome. Thank you so much. This design was actually created by my girlfriend and I, but if you want to know the model maker herself, there you go, right there in chat. It was created and rigged by Amalthea VT. Or Amalthea Art. She's an amazing artist. She did all of this. In fact, real quick, that's not all it can do, though. Give me a second. I do want to show y'all some of the other stuff it can do. It's really cool. So allow me to show some of the other things it can do real quick. So, first of all, behold, all the wisps of the forest of memories. Each one of them a powerful enough memory to take on a physical form. The yellow one is George. The red one is Frank. And, the rest of these guys don't have names yet. We're working on that. Aside from that, I have multiple expressions, each one tied to a different emotional wisp, as you can see, which I'm very happy with. And you can pet George if you want to. That's a redeem. But that's not the only thing. Now, I don't know how many of y'all are going to get this, Star. If you do, if people recognize this, sorry, if people recognize this, awesome. But, well, you'll see. From the moment I understood the weakness of my flesh, it disgusted me. I craved the sanctity and purity of the machine. Your kind pray to this withered husk of a form, claiming it will save you. Oh yeah, I'm not using the voice changer. But this is an Adeptus Mechanicus outfit from Warhammer 40k. This was also done by Amalthea, which I think is really cool. I use this costume for like mechanical stuff or for horror games and stuff like that. But yeah, that's me, Zaruk Windcaller, Guardian of the Forest of Memories. Y'all are just in time. It is Meme Tank Monday. I've basically been watching a lot of meme videos about tanks with my community. We're almost done. And instead of doing tanks, we're going to watch one more funny video. Yes. Thank you, Goats for Days. That's the whole quote. Even in death, I serve the Omnissiah. But anyway, y'all are just in time for one more video. Oh, yes, and if y'all are also wondering, wait, why are you so big? Yeah, that's one of the abilities my community has. You can enlarge my my model with Grow the Imp down below. It's a command. But we're almost done for the stream. There's one more thing I want to watch. And we're going to watch another meme video, but this one's going to be naval. Yes, thank you. Oh, thank you, Goats for Days, for the follow. I greatly appreciate it. So we're going to watch a little funny video because, well, I like funny videos. And because I'm a history major, I can kind of give a bit more details on a few things. So, hey, Edding XDD725, thank you for the follow. Means a lot. Welcome to the Forest of Memories. But without further ado, let's get started. The Bismarck, Germany's big oof. I love this video. Now, excuse me. Yes, it will be, Andrea.
Battleship. Battleship.
I cannot explain how messed up that is. To hear oof over actual footage of ships shooting at each other, but fuck it, let's play it again.
Battleship. 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 Milton Bradley's great game.
Wait, okay. This is kind of quick, so I want to pause at all these bits.
Battleship. Milton Bradley.
Please help.
Bradley's great game of strategy. It's loaded with action and suspense.
Prepare your ass.
Play it anytime, anywhere.
4. Hit. J1. Ha! You missed. J10. Oh, you got my battleship.
Battleship, a game of from Deutschland.
This video was sponsored by the people at Wargaming, in their free-to-play game World of Warships, where you can command a massive naval fleet featuring tons of iconic warships. This game is incredibly detailed and realistic. You really feel like you're living the battle. I mean, even the weather affects gameplay. And if you aren't paying attention, you can run aground like an idiot. Every week they have new missions and events and are constantly updating the game, so it's always something different when you log on, and always keeps you entertained. New players can use the code PLAYWARSHIPS2018 to get some awesome in-game content to boost your gameplay from the start, including 250 doubloons, 1,000,000 credits, 3 days of premium, a premium ship, the Campbelltown,
we're gonna
story of
skip that.
the Bismarck, or as I like to call it, the Germans' big After the Treaty of Versailles in 1918, Germany's armed forces were stripped to a bare minimum, and a lot is talked about how the Army and Air Force were built back up very quickly. But the same is also true of the Kriegsmarine, or German Navy. Being left with few ships in the interwar period, the Germans hurriedly built many battleships that would later take part in the upcoming war in the Atlantic. The crown jewel of these ships, that was first laid in 1936 and completed in 1941, was the gigantic battleship Bismarck, commanded by Captain Otto Ernst Lindemann.
Okay,
the battleship at
so,
the time...
Hold up. Fun fact about this man.
Commanded by Captain Otto...
About Otto Lindemann. So, so again, I want to apologize, Star, to everyone in your community who's here. I'm a history nerd, and I want to try to make history fun and engaging for people. And this is kind of one of the ways I do it. So, real quick. There's a lot of interesting stuff about Captain Lindemann. Because I don't really buy this theory. But there is a theory that Lindemann purposefully got the Bismarck sunk. I know that sounds crazy. But the thing is, Lindemann was actually an anti-Nazi. I am not kidding. He was so anti-Nazi that when the angry mustache man himself came to tour the Bismarck, everyone else on the ship gave the traditional angry mustache man salute. Not Captain Lindemann. Captain Lindemann gave him the standard naval salute. I want y'all to let that sink in for a second. Out of a crew of almost 2,000 people, everyone else gave the angry mustache man salute, but not this man. This man was bold enough to say, yeah, no, I'm not doing that to you. Not on my ship. So, yeah.
Ernst Lindemann. The battleship at the time of its creation was one of the largest and most advanced of the time, boasting ridiculous speeds, thick armor, and a litany of guns, including 8 15-inch guns housed in 4 turrets.
And at the time, these were some of the biggest guns put on any ship in any naval fleet in the world at the time. 15 inches. Granted, they would be surpassed later by the 16-inch guns used on both British and American ships, but for the time, these were monsters. Most ships were only using 14-inch guns, if that.
Very understandably, the launch of this ship made the British very nervous, as on paper it looked like it had the potential to be an unstoppable beast in the Atlantic. As a result, the British tried to keep eyes on it from the day it launched. Its first actual combat mission began on the evening of May 19, 1941, where when leaving port with its escort ship Prince Eugen, it is immediately photographed by a British plane with the information relayed back to the Royal Navy.
Oh, off to a good start already.
Now, although the Bismarck was a battleship killer...
Actually, that's not the only thing that happened. It didn't go directly to the British Navy. No, what happened was, the planes flying over sent the information to a Swedish attaché. Yeah, to a naval attaché in Sweden. That naval attaché, or that naval administrator, then goes to a British foreign dignitary who's eating dinner in Sweden, and basically gives him a telephone and says, "Sir, we got this information for you. You may want to call back home." The British attaché then picks up the phone, calls London, and says, "Hey, the Bismarck is leaving." And from there, it's off to the races.
This was not its mission on its maiden voyage. Much more of a threat to Germany than British battleships was British merchant shipping. which is what had kept Britain in the war so far. The Germans figured that if Bismarck could head north, through the Denmark Strait, around England near Iceland, and into the Atlantic undetected, it could wreak havoc on British ships bringing supplies to Great Britain. However, this begins to go awry almost immediately. As mentioned before, Bismarck was spotted as it left port at the beginning of its mission. This caused several British ships, including the HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, and the HMS Prince of Wales, to steam towards the strait to intercept the Bismarck. It's also worth mentioning that Linderman did not fully fill his fuel tanks before departure, and a lot of people point to this as a big mistake. It's actually not that dumb, as there were several German oil tankers in the North Atlantic where he planned to refuel, and the advantage of leaving with full tanks was negligible compared to the advantage of leaving sooner in hopes of not being spotted, although that obviously didn't work out. Yeah. On May 24th, after sailing north and around Iceland, German lookouts spotted the Hood and Prince of Wales under the command of Vice Admiral Holland. Once within range, the Hood began firing upon the Prince Eugen, mistaking it for the Bismarck, while Prince of Wales fired correctly at Bismarck.
Okay, so the reason for that happening is because earlier on, it wasn't just the Prince of Wales and the Hood that found the Bismarck. Two cruisers, Sheffield and I think it was Dorchester and Suffolk were shadowing the Bismarck with their radar. One of them got too close, and the main guns on Bismarck fired at it. The problem is, upon firing those guns, Bismarck's own radar was knocked out because of the concussion from the blast. So, Captain Linderman ordered the Prince Eugen to take the lead, so they could use Prince Eugen's radar to navigate the ice floes that were up ahead. That's why Prince Eugen was out in front.
Prince Eugen returned fire immediately.
Prince Eugen was Bismarck's sibling ship? No. Prince Eugen was a heavy cruiser attached to Bismarck.
Immediately, with the Bismarck.
You're thinking of Tirpitz.
Bismarck beginning to do so a few minutes later. Prince Eugen was ordered to target the Prince of Wales to keep both opponents under fire, as the Bismarck targeted the Hood. However, it is at this point that the Bismarck ran into another problem. The Germans had equipped the Bismarck with advanced radar systems to aid in the range finding for her main guns. The radar system itself was located right next to one of the gun turrets. In one of the first salvos fired at the Hood, the concussion from the guns damaged the relay of these rangefinders, so from this point on, the gunners could not rely on them for sighting.
Ooh. I know, ads. There.
After firing.
And there's a bit more to it than just that. Bismarck didn't just wait a few minutes and then shoot. Captain basically, they, the orders for the Bismarck, were not to engage in battle. It was meant to be a commerce raider. So Admiral Lütjens, who potential history does not mention here, Admiral Lütjens was the man attached to be the overseer of this mission. So Admiral Lütjens was there and basically told the Bismarck not to return fire. They were supposed to save their shells for commerce raiding. So after, minute after minute, the Hood and the Prince of Wales are just firing away at Bismarck and Prince Eugen, and Bismarck doesn't return fire. Until finally, Captain Linderman, who can't take it anymore, basically tells him, and I don't speak German, hold on. Well, let me see. Let me see if I can get this right. Let me see. Sorry, I have to look this up. Yes, here's the quote. Yeah. In German, if I can get it right here, where is it? Where is it? One moment, everybody. Where is it? Yeah. Yeah, Linderman basically told him, ich lasse mir doch nicht mein Schiff unter dem Arschwischen Feierlobnis, which is, again, I don't speak German, but he basically told them straight up, told Admiral Lutyens, I will not have them shoot my ship out from under my ass. Open fire! And they began shooting.
Several salvos, one of Bismarck's shells managed to land through the Hood's rear deck and detonate her magazine, sinking it in about 2 minutes, taking all but 3 of her 1,419-man crew with her.
Okay, we're going to stop there for a second because I need to explain that. HMS Hood had a crew of 1,419 men, and one shell killed the ship and had it sink in 2 minutes, and there were only 3 survivors. Now, this footage doesn't show it. I'm going to show you guys what happened to the Hood. One moment. There's actual, like, recreated footage of this. Let's see. So y'all can see this. Not tonight. Not tonight, I'm afraid. Sorry. This is the last thing of the stream. We're not doing it tonight, Max Owen. I'll do it tomorrow, but not tonight. Let me show you,
By God's light, I smite you!
Thank you, Andrea. So let me show you. Let me show you guys exactly what happened to Hood. Make sure this is the right bit. Okay. So this is what happened. Oop. Why did that zoom out? There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know why that happened, but let me show you guys what happened. This is from the show Dogfights, but this is what happened.
Horror as a geyser of flames spewed from Hood's ruptured deck.
This massive amount of powder in that magazine did something we call deflagration. It's like a giant Roman candle burning in an enclosed space.
Then, a huge explosion buckles the hull, twisting and shearing the mighty ship in half.
Yeah, that's all it took. One shell did all of that. It hit the main magazine and tore the ship in half. And it took 2 minutes for it to sink, which is why only 3 men survived.
After this, both German ships continued to fire on the Prince of Wales, which was heavily damaged, losing her bridge in the fight along with her officers. This was not before the Prince of Wales struck a hit on the Bismarck, entering towards the bow near the deck line and exiting on the other side near the waterline.
Oh yeah, I guess he's not going to mention the thing about how lucky the Prince of Wales got. Because here's the thing. One of Bismarck's shells, after getting a hit on Bismarck, one of Bismarck's return fire shells punched right through Prince of Wales' bridge. Everyone on that bridge was killed except the captain and two orderlies. That's it. The captain on the Prince of Wales wasn't even scratched. His orderlies were injured, but every other officer on that bridge minced. Just completely. There's even reports from the battle saying when the men down below sent words up to the voice pipes to get communication from the bridge, all that happened was blood started dripping down the voice pipes and landing on their maps and on their papers because everyone up there was basically dead.
The Prince of Wales retreated to safety, but Linderman realized the shell had punctured one of the oil tanks, and Bismarck was now leaking oil into the ocean. Now this isn't a huge problem for most ships, but remember, the Bismarck is trying to move stealthily, and it now has a giant oil slick trailing behind it, giving away its position to any potential aircraft above. After the battle, Bismarck reported that it had sunk one ship, most likely the Hood, and heavily damaged another. Linderman also reported the damage to the Bismarck and his intentions to head for ports in France to make repairs, and to detach Prince Eugen to keep the mission going. Now after After the sinking of the Hood, the Royal Navy doubled its efforts to take down the Bismarck. However, at this point, its position had been lost, and the British ships giving chase actually began to move in the wrong direction, thinking it was heading north. When all seemed lost, though, the Bismarck's commander decided to radio Berlin in a somewhat incoherent ramble about their dire situation, in a message that was picked up by British ships and was able to be used to find the Bismarck's position. Shortly after this, the Bismarck's oil slick was spotted by a British seaplane, and the chase was back on. However, British ships in the Atlantic were too far away.
Okay, that is also not exactly true. Yes, a seaplane did spot the oil slick, but it wasn't a British seaplane. No, it was an American PBY Catalina. That was on with an American pilot on loan to the British. It was an American pilot secretly aiding the British with a PBY Catalina flying boat. He spotted the oil slick and relayed that information back to the British ships nearby. So, yeah, kind of cool how that works out, huh? Let's see. But yeah, so little cool little detail there. Anyway, back to it.
Way to be able to catch it in time, and ships from the Mediterranean were ordered out and north to intercept the ship before it could get to France. This group, called Force H, contained the aircraft carrier Ark Royal, carrying a number of obsolete swordfish torpedo planes. Knowing he could not catch up to the Bismarck with his ships in time, Admiral James Somerville decided to launch his planes in an attempt to stall the Bismarck so that the battleships could catch up. Now, this attack is a literal David and Goliath scenario. The Bismarck had many anti-aircraft guns on it, and the swordfish were very slow, open-top biplanes. Despite this, though, no swordfish were taken out in the battle, and one of their torpedoes managed to actually damage the Bismarck's rudder, making it dead in the water. And the whole battle is a meme in itself. If you want to know more about how none of the swordfish were taken out, check out Military History Visualized video on the battle.
I fear no man.
But that thing scares me.
Now, with her rudder jammed, the Bismarck was now moving in a large circle, unable to escape the oncoming British force, which included the battleships King George V, the Rodney, and heavy cruisers Dorsetshire and Norfolk. Following a few skirmishes, the King George V led an attack on the 27th of May, where it and Rodney began the engagement from far off. Closing in as the battle continued, with the Norfolk and Dorsetshire beginning to fire when within range. The Bismarck attempted to fire back, but to no real effect. Due to the Bismarck's thick armor on her hull, the British guns were having little effect there. They began to target the superstructure of the ship. And this is where we get to the biggest irony of the battle. Bismarck was such a huge and well-armored ship that this advantage ended up almost being a disadvantage to her in her last moments. Because she couldn't sink, her decks began to be shelled and her sailors dodged artillery fires if they were infantry on land.
I see no god up here except me.
Congratulations, you played yourself.
One by one, Bismarck's gun turrets went silent, and enough damage was eventually done to the ship that it rolled over and later sank.
Yeah, and here's the thing, just to put into perspective how thick this ship was, there are numerous reports of so many shells slamming into Bismarck's hull that the kinetic impacts were heating up the hull so much that the ocean around the hull was boiling. Like steam was coming off of the water. That's how hot the hull was upon touching the ocean water. And it should also be mentioned that Rodney and King George V closed to basically point-blank range, angled all of their guns, and fired point-blank broadsides into this thing, and it still wouldn't sink. It refused to die.
I know there's a whole debate over whether or not British guns or German scuttling took down the ship. I've heard convincing arguments for both, and I don't think there's anything I could really add to that conversation.
Oh, and in case y'all are wondering what happened to Captain Lindemann and Admiral Lutyens, they were actually killed very early on in this final battle when one of King George V's shells punched through the Bismarck's bridge, because like he said, they couldn't make any damage on the hull, so they switched to the superstructure. And it just so happens that one of King George XV's shells punched right through the bridge and killed everyone there. Unlike Prince of Wales' captain, who got off scot-free, unless you count being knocked on your ass, knocked slightly unconscious, waking up and seeing that your entire bridge crew has basically basically been plastered all over the wall in a horrific, gory display as, getting off scot-free. But no, Captain Linderman and Admiral Luchins were not that lucky. They got vaporized along with the rest of the bridge crew.
I will say, though, that regardless of who dealt the actual killing, sinking blow, the ship had been combat ineffective for a while now, and the whole argument seems kind of pointless to me. Once sunk, some of the Bismarck's crew were picked up by the British ships, although before all were grabbed, it is thought that a U-boat was spotted far off, and the British ships had to withdraw, leaving a significant portion of the survivors in the water to drown.
Okay, it has actually been proven now that it was not a thought, there was an actual U-boat there. And at the end of the day, as horrific as it sounds, a captain's dedication is to the crew he's serving, not the men in the not the men floating in the water. So many of the British ships were like, "No, we're leaving. We're not going to put our ships at risk just to save these guys." And that sounds really messed up because they left hundreds of men in the water. Like, there are hundreds of German sailors in the water. But the thing is, what could they do? If they stayed, they put themselves at risk. Because a German submarine is not going to hesitate to fire on you if you stop. So they were just like, no, we're leaving. Go. We can't wait any longer. So ironically, had that U-boat not showed up, a lot more men would have been saved.
Now, I had not read much about the War in the Atlantic previous to making this video, but it is interesting to me that the same faults found in the land war are also very present in the War in the Atlantic. First is that you have a very cost-intensive, technology-advanced weapon that can only be made in small quantities, but is created in the hope that it can kill at a high ratio. Does that sound familiar? The Bismarck to me is the epitome of the Germans putting all their eggs in one basket, just like they do with, say, their mid to late war tank designs. And it's funny to me how pervasive the problem was. Second, the atrocious planning made for this ship on her maiden voyage. A lot of people criticized Linderman for his actions, particularly his message back to Berlin, and blame him for the issues the Bismarck had. But I don't think this is the case, though. This is another classic example of the German high command biting off more than they can chew, based on technological overconfidence. The original plan for the Bismarck's maiden voyage was meant to involve many more ships. However, these ships had been damaged previously and were still undergoing repairs when the operation was set to launch. But the Germans launched it anyway, placing all their faith in the Bismarck's ability to fight. You can even make the argument that the Bismarck itself wasn't ready for the fight, as the crew had been quickly rushed through its training, and that's pretty clearly exemplified in the second half of its combat performance. Given all of these things that the Bismarck had to deal with, it looks as if it was almost sent out to die, even if that was the last intention of the German high command. And I think what happened was, with Barbarossa coming up in the following month, the War in the Atlantic was the last thing on the German High Command's mind. But it was still a big issue. So rather than divert time and planning to correctly roll out the Bismarck, they threw it out there in an attempt to solve the problem quickly, but with no real thought put into how. And this gave the British a prime opportunity to destroy the pride of Germany, while its head was turned eastward. Thanks again to World...
Yeah, that's basically... that's the perfect way of putting it, honestly. The Kriegsmarine was never properly funded at all. The Kriegsmarine was always like a third, was basically like third or fourth on the rung of who was going to get special treatment. But with that, that's going to be the end of this stream. Before you all go, big thank you to Star for the raid. I greatly appreciate it. If you guys would like to follow me on social media to know what I'm going to be up to, I put down my social media link down there for my Twitter. You can follow me down there. I also have a YouTube page where I post VODs and compilations if you want to see what kind of streamer I am. And if you were interested in what I did, thought I was funny, or thought, or been like, oh, he's kind of cool. I also have a Discord that you can join. And I would be humbled and very appreciative if you guys did. With that in mind, we're going to get ready to raid someone because Star raided me, and I believe in sharing the love and support. So we're going to go find someone to raid. With that in mind, I hope you all had a wonderful night tonight. As always, it is a privilege and a pleasure to entertain all of you. So it means a lot that you're all here. Big thank you again to Star and her community. Thank you all for coming here. I'm glad. I hope I was at least able to entertain y'all for a short period of time, even if it was kind of boring. I know history isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I want to at least make it kind of interesting for people. That's always been something that intrigues me and makes me happy. So in the meantime, let me see. Who can we go raid? I do have someone we could raid, but I think he'd get mad at me. So let's see. Let's see. You know what? I think I got someone we can go raid. Yeah, we can go raid this person. Or actually, nope, never mind. They're logging off for the night. Dang. Well. Oh, well, he's it. I know he's going to be so mad at me, but he's it. So, oops. Always better to ask for forgiveness ask for forgiveness than than permission. So, give me a second, everybody. I'm going to take y'all to meet another one of my good friends. He's a great guy. And with that, as I get this raid started, I've been Zaruk Windcaller. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to entertain all of you. And remember, most importantly, the memories you make in life, good and bad, make you who you are. Do not change them for anything. Be you, be yourself, and be who you want to be. You will always be welcome in my community that way. Be yourself. That's all anyone ever wants you to be. All right. Love you guys. See you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.